Hello, everyone. Today we will learn about another case, the case of Gail Clevenger. Our story takes place in DeBary, a small town in Florida near Orlando. Gail Clevenger, a 46-year-old mother and wife, is one of 6 children in a large family. Growing up in a dysfunctional home, she endured abuse from her parents. Not only did they struggle with alcoholism, but they also neglected their children, often falling into poverty and barely able to provide for the family. Gail had 4 sisters and a brother. Despite the misery and chaos of their home life, they found support in one another. Growing up in an unstable family made her fearless and independent. Gail remained strong, positive, and friendly. The difficulties she faced only strengthened her spirit. Throughout her life, Gail had a passion for art. She played the violin as a child. She dreamed of pursuing her talents in music and art, but quickly realized that achieving her goals would be difficult without her parents' support. As a result, she chose to work in a more practical and profitable field. In 1990, she graduated from high school and enrolled at the University of Miami to study architecture. Gail was highly intelligent, achieving excellent academic results and graduating with honors. As a young and energetic woman, she felt ready to take on any challenge. Although architecture is often seen as a difficult field, especially for women, Gail found her first job within a month and quickly advanced in her career. By the mid-1990s, she was in a serious relationship and had married her boyfriend. Unfortunately, their relationship was troubled from the beginning and soon became abusive. The trauma from her childhood resurfaced, and Gail faced a difficult battle. With the support of close friends, she was able to escape her husband's manipulation. They helped her numerous times and assisted her in obtaining a restraining order. Leaving this abusive marriage was a pivotal moment for her. The only bright spot during this time was the birth of her son, Gregory Logan Ramos, for whom she was able to secure full custody. Gail always hopes to find love and happiness. In the early 2000s, she met Danny, a calm and family-oriented man. She felt that her luck was finally changing and that she could build the loving family she had always dreamed of. Initially cautious, she grew more confident in Danny's suitability as a partner over time. About a year later, they decided to get married. By 2018, Gail was living with Danny, her son Gregory, and Danny's children, who had been abandoned by their biological mother. This new family gave Gregory a brother and a sister. During this period, Gail was thriving at work, but she faced challenges in her personal life, particularly with her biological son, Gregory. From an early age, Gregory exhibited limited social skills. While he had a few friends, he often struggled to fit in, particularly when confronted with new or unfamiliar situations. Worried about your child's condition, Gail wanted to help him develop social confidence. She enrolled him in karate classes, hoping that participating in a sport would boost his self-esteem and help him communicate better with peers. Unfortunately, the relationship between the siblings in the family did not develop as she expected. Gail put in a lot of effort to connect with her son. Many people recognized her as a caring and devoted mother who did everything for him. In her free time from work, she worked hard to create a nurturing environment for his upbringing, one that she had missed out on during her own childhood. She believed it was important for him to focus on his education and career, but her attempts to communicate this seemed to go unheard. At this time, the family lived in a large house where 15-year-old Gregory and his siblings each had their own rooms. Gail felt proud to have achieved her dream of a happy family life. However, not everyone shared her positive outlook. Gregory was in middle school, where he had a small circle of friends, but overall, he struggled to fit into society. His performance in class was average. He didn't stand out in any particular way and lacked enthusiasm for school activities. It seemed that his mother was more invested in his achievements than he was. He rarely met up with friends outside of school and preferred to spend most of his time alone in his room playing video games. His main hobby was gaming. and he also enjoyed listening to loud music late into the night in his room. During this time, he got into many conflicts and fights, attracting the attention of the police. His mother did her best to protect him from trouble and managed to persuade the police to give them a chance to sort things out. A psychologist then worked with Gregory and determined that he had no intelligence or developmental issues. Rather, he was simply too lazy to succeed and achieve his goals. At the age of 15, this situation was further complicated by the difficult transition period Gregory was experiencing. Gail was very concerned about her son's legal issues. She recognized that nothing serious had happened so far, but she feared that if they couldn't get him under control, it could lead to more significant problems. To address this, she tried to redirect Gregory's focus from video games to his studies. The consistent pressure from his mother resulted in improved academic performance. He began to do better in school. However, Gregory disliked any interference in his life and resisted her efforts. At the end of 2018, his grades started to decline again. He struggled with several new topics across different subjects. His mother attempted to explain everything to him, but Gregory stubbornly refused to listen. Gail and her children collaborated to encourage Gregory in his studies. On November 1, 2018, Danny and his children went to visit relatives in another city, leaving Gail alone with Gregory. Despite the lack of support during their discussion about his education, Gail continued to motivate Gregory, hoping to steer him back on track. That evening, she checked his grades and noticed that he was falling below the passing mark. Concerned, she arranged another talk with him, stressing the importance of focusing on his education to earn a good diploma, which would help him get into college and build a future. As usual, the rebellious teenager Gregory listened without displaying much emotion. The next morning, Gregory went to school as usual. He remained quiet and reserved, interacting only with a small group of friends. After school, he returned home around 3 p.m. The emergency services received a worrying call from a boy who identified himself as 15-year-old Gregory Logan Ramos. He reported that upon his return from school, he found the door to his home broken and the interior in disarray. He hesitated to go further inside, worried that an intruder might be hiding there. Gregory had been at school all day and was anxious because his mother's car was in the driveway, yet everything inside was eerily quiet. He feared that his mother might be in trouble. Gregory hadn't seen her and thought she could be at work, possibly borrowing someone else's car or getting a ride from a colleague that morning. However, the broken door and the mess inside raised concerns about his mother's safety. The dispatcher spoke with Gregory to gather more information about the situation, and a patrol car was sent to their home. When the officers arrived, they found Gregory waiting outside, visibly upset. He pointed out the broken door and appeared very distressed. By then, neighbors had noticed the commotion and approached to offer support. Gregory attempted to call his mother several times, but each attempt went unanswered. The police quickly searched the house, but found nothing out of the ordinary. There were no bloodstains or other signs of danger. They assessed the damage inside and concluded that the intruder seemed intent on destruction rather than theft. The officers wondered why the neighbors hadn't heard anything during such a chaotic event, but everyone just shrugged, seemingly indifferent. Gregory believed the robber had entered their home while he was at school. The most concerning issue was the disappearance of Gail. Gregory was extremely anxious, prompting the authorities to take him to a local medical center for evaluation and possible calming medication. The situation was further complicated by the lack of other family members present. Aside from Gail and Gregory, no one else was in the house. Although there were suspicions of revenge from the ex-husband, this theory was quickly ruled out because he had a solid alibi, confirmed by colleagues and surveillance footage showing he was at work. Gregory was deeply affected by the break-in and his mother's disappearance. He was later taken to the police station for a more in-depth discussion, where they hoped he would cooperate. However, Gregory was reluctant to assist. He took considerable time to think through his answers. His initial shock and confusion shifted to focus and anxiety. The officers noticed fresh scratches and bruises on Gregory's body, indicating he had been in some sort of struggle. He also had bruises under his eyes, and his face and hands were badly scraped. When asked about the incident, Gregory mentioned that he had been involved in a fight at school. However, when pressed for details and the names of the boys involved, he struggled to express himself clearly. He failed to mention the names of those who had instigated the conflict, and his responses seemed vague, as if he were making up a story on the spot. Sensing that the police were skeptical of his account, Gregory began to shy away from the topic during the questioning. One detective noticed the inconsistencies in his statements and started to focus on Gregory's body language. As the interrogation continued, Gregory grew increasingly anxious. The officers began to doubt his credibility. Gregory frequently played with his hair, rubbed his leg and arm, covered his eyes with his hand while responding, and crossed his limbs, all of which indicated his discomfort and desire to withdraw from the conversation. The detectives were piecing together the timeline of events from the past 2 days, focusing on the time he had spent alone with his mother at home to determine their next steps. One officer observed that Gregory could recount his morning routine and his return home from school with precise timing, as if he had rehearsed it. Gregory struggled to remember when he had last had dinner or the last time he saw his mother. This indicated that he was trying to focus on the timeline to avoid inconsistencies in his story, but he hadn't considered all the details, which left him unable to answer questions. The detectives were suspicious of Gregory, although his age made them hesitant. As the interrogation continued, one investigator wanted to learn about Gregory's relationship with his mother. Gregory became increasingly anxious. He repeatedly claimed he did not kill his mother, even though no one had asked him about it. He started talking about a group of friends he described as suspicious, suggesting that the police investigate them. By this point, Gregory had changed his story multiple times, and the police were closely monitoring the inconsistencies in his account. They kept pressing him for clarification. Eventually, he felt it was time to tell the truth. Gregory explained that the turning point happened the day before he called for help when he returned home from school. His mother slapped him for getting bad grades. Normally, she didn't react so violently, but this time, she lost control because he had failed biology. He reported that Gail began to hit and insult him. The situation escalated, forcing Gregory to defend himself. During the struggle, he managed to overpower his mother, but accidentally went too far. Realizing what had happened, he panicked and didn't understand his actions. In a state of confusion, he decided to hide his mother's body in a car and drove away to figure out what to do next. After the incident, he experienced a nervous breakdown and had several thoughts of ending his own life, but each time he managed to resist those urges. He wandered through the city and its outskirts until he discovered a quiet spot. There, he noticed a large blackened area from a campfire and started to dig. After digging a hole, Gregory pulled his mother's body out of the car and placed it in a shallow grave. He attempted to remove her wedding ring to sell it, but it wouldn't come off. Frustrated, he even tried cutting off her finger, but only injured it. Eventually, he left everything as it was, covered the hole with dirt and leaves, and went home as if nothing had happened. Feeling very tired, he planned to rest and go to school the next morning. His behavior was so calm that none of his classmates noticed anything unusual when they were questioned later. However, Gregory's troubles didn't end there. After returning home, he realized that his mother's sudden disappearance would raise suspicions. So, before school, he decided to fake a break-in and robbery. He planned to call the police when he got back. As he began his act in the morning, he found it too noisy and cumbersome to do alone, so he thought about recruiting his friends. According to the police, he successfully staged the break-in, aided by his knowledge of forensics, which he had gained from attending a related club. Gregory's friends, Dylan Seglerek and Brian Porras, drove over in the morning to pick him up for school. And on the way, Gregory made several significant mistakes. First, he couldn't keep quiet about his crime. He openly told his friends, Dylan and Brian, that he had killed his mother, even showing some pride in his confession. Gregory also asked his classmates to help him stage the crime scene. However, they thought it was a joke and were more interested in exploring someone else's house. After school, the group planned to search through Gregory's house. They skipped their last class and went to his house. Inside, there was no trace of his mother's body, but the house was a mess. The state of the house was a result of the three teenagers joyfully destroying everything after Gregory had let them. Meanwhile, the police noticed that some items were untouched. These belonged to Gregory and included a hunting rifle from his father, a hunting bow, a gaming computer, and other valuable possessions. After trashing the house, his friends wished him luck and left. However, their plan was not yet finished. Gregory contacted the police and pretended to be a scared son during the investigation. Some of Gail's belongings were found with Dylan, leading to his confession. It was more challenging to get a confession from Brian, who adamantly denied his involvement in the destruction. With the assistance of his friends, a timeline of events was reconstructed and verified by Gregory. It was clear that the act was carefully planned. It appeared to be premeditated murder rather than self-defense. By that time, many people who knew the Clevenger family had been interviewed, and they confirmed that Gregory had always been a troublemaker. They were not surprised that Gregory was capable of such an act. Despite the gravity of the situation, all three detainees were joking and having fun in the police station, unaware of the seriousness of their circumstances. Dylan and Brian might have expected a less severe consequence than a murder charge, but it was crucial to determine their actual involvement in the crime. After being questioned, all three individuals were taken to the Juvenile Justice Department and held in detention. Gail's body was found exactly where it had been indicated. Gregory had attempted to hide the grave, but did so carelessly, leaving part of her leg visible above the ground. The medical examiner determined that the cause of death was strangulation. On November 4, 2018, 15-year-old Gregory Ramos was charged with first-degree murder of his mother, improper handling of a body, and tampering with evidence to avoid punishment. The hearings were filled with emotion. Gregory cried frequently and offered apologies to everyone present. Many felt that he did not genuinely regret his actions, but was instead trying to reduce his culpability. His family attended the courtroom. They were shocked by the events. Danny and his children were struggling to cope with Gail's death, as they had all loved her deeply. Several statements were made during the hearings. Gregory asked for mercy for his friends Brian and Dylan, insisting they were not involved in the crime. He repeated this claim, but the prosecution focused solely on the facts, continuing the investigation. According to Gregory, he and his friends were unaware of the full extent of the crime, and his friends did not believe that his mother had been murdered. When he realized the severity of the situation, he tried to make light of it, fabricating a story to explain why chaos ensued at home. Considering Gregory's age, he had a good chance of being acquitted or receiving a very light sentence. To reach a compromise, the prosecution proposed a plea deal. Because he was a minor, Gregory was not facing the death penalty, but if he confessed, he could avoid life imprisonment. Gregory accepted the deal and explained that he had an argument with his mother over a bad grade that evening. He did not argue back. Instead, he went to his room, slammed the door, and tried to sleep, but he couldn't. While Gregory was trying to sleep in his room, Gail called her husband, who was out of town, visiting relatives with their children. She told him about the argument with Gregory, and he reassured her, promising to come back in a couple of days to address the situation. The hurtful words his mother had said during the argument kept playing in Gregory's mind. Eventually, he left his room and confronted his mother again, and the argument escalated. In a moment of rage, Gregory attacked her, strangling her with his bare hands for about half an hour until she stopped breathing. It's important to note that during that time, he could have chosen to calm down and stop, making it difficult to classify his actions as unintentional. The court sentenced Gregory to 45 years in prison, allowing for parole after 25 years. He would also be on probation for the rest of his life. Although Gregory sought a lighter sentence, his friends faced difficulties. They were threatened with up to 30 years in prison following preliminary hearings. Their bail was denied. Gregory's history of mental illness, which raised concerns about the risk of self-harm or flight. Dylan was held without bail for 309 days, with bail set at $200,000, a sum beyond his family's financial means. By February 8, 2021, he had spent 828 days in the county jail and had not yet pleaded guilty to aiding and abetting the murder, leaving a jury trial pending. During the hearings, the prosecution lacked sufficient evidence to prove Dylan's involvement, leading the judge to propose a compromise. Ultimately, Dylan was sentenced to 10 years of probation. Brian experienced the least hardship. After preliminary hearings, he was allowed to post bail of $100,000. He faced standard restrictions during the investigation, but was able to complete his schooling and enroll in college without violating any conditions. On July 8, 2021, Brian appeared in court. His lawyers argued that over the 3 years he spent free, he had demonstrated that he was a responsible member of society and posed no threat to anyone. On the other side, Gail's family, including Danny and his children, believed that Brian, as a co-conspirator in the violent act, should serve at least 828 days in prison, just like his friend Dylan. They argued that he should receive the same punishment, followed by 10 years of probation. Brian's lawyer attempted to persuade the jurors that Brian had become a victim of his friend's poor choices and lack of judgment. Although Brian was involved in the incident, his age limited his understanding of the situation. Meanwhile, the prosecution maintained that he deserved punishment. They pointed out that Brian failed to report the incident to the police, despite being aware of his friend's confession about the murder of his mother. The defense countered by stating that neither Dylan nor Brian truly believed Gregory's claims. Ultimately, Brian was given a conditional sentence. Danny believes that Gregory's accomplices should have faced harsher penalties. He and others think they assisted Gregory in digging a grave and hiding his mother's body. This suggests that Gregory recruited his friends not just for the attack, but also for the burial. However, eventually, Danny stated that he had forgiven the teenagers, as he realized that no amount of anger or desire for revenge would bring his wife back. He chose to move on from the situation. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Terry McAdams. The main character in today's story is Terry McAdams, a vibrant and active 22-year-old from Arlington, Texas. Since her teenage years, she enjoyed driving around the neighborhoods in her convertible. She often spent time in the city with friends, listening to music. Terry was a bright and popular cheerleader who always drew attention but remained modest and well-mannered. She deeply loved her sisters, Hopper and Pamela, and shared a close bond with all her relatives. Terry acted as a mentor for her sisters, bridging the gap between them and their mother. She enjoyed dancing with them and even taught them how to drive. Everyone who knew Terry described her as a person who loved life. After graduating from high school, she enrolled in the University of Arkansas. Before completing her degree, she decided to move to Arlington to be with her fiancé, Karen Anderson, who was a few years older and had already graduated. After graduation, she planned to start a career and marry Karen, who proposed to her. Since 1984, local newspapers have been reporting on the murders in the Fort Worth area. During this time, Terry was studying at university and took the threat very seriously. She was genuinely afraid for her life, a concern she shared frequently with Karen and family. To protect herself, Terry made several significant changes. She quit her well-paying job in Irving, where she had to drive every day and return home in the dark. Understanding the potential danger, she decided it wasn't worth the risk of driving at night. Despite being young and energetic, Terry began to live a very cautious lifestyle. She stopped going out at night, avoided parties, and only left her home during the day when accompanied by Karen. She even felt anxious about going grocery shopping and often called her mother multiple times a day to express her fears. Terry was genuinely worried about the situation, especially since the authorities had not yet identified the criminal, leaving the streets of Arlington feeling unsafe. Around the same time, Texas police bodies formed a task force consisting of experienced experts to look into a series of violent crimes and prevent further massacres. They believed that a serial killer, or potentially multiple terrorists, were active in the area. Terry felt particularly anxious because she fit the profile of the victims. They were all attractive, around her age, and lived nearby. It was difficult for her to cope, but Karen provided strong support. She admitted to her mother and sisters that being alone was the most frightening part. To help her feel safer, Karen decided to leave his job and accept a new high-paying position closer to home, though it occasionally required business trips to nearby cities. During her moments of panic, she limited her outings and rushed home after school. For any important tasks, she aimed to handle them early in the morning and always sought someone to accompany her. On the morning of February 13, 1985, the local police station received a disturbing call. An employee responsible for technical maintenance at the residential complex where Terry lived reported that he was unable to gain access to the apartment. When the police arrived, no one answered the door, and they were unable to reach the Terry's relatives. As a result, they decided to speak with local residents. Neighbors confirmed the repairman's account. They also could not contact Terry but reported hearing suspicious noises coming from her apartment. The police then decided to break down the door to enter her apartment. Inside, they discovered a gruesome scene. Terry's body was found in the bedroom on the bed. Terry had been raped and brutally beaten with a blunt object. Based on the condition of her body and the blood evidence, it seemed the crime took place at night or early in the morning before the police were called. Forensic experts quickly arrived at the scene to begin their investigation. It was clear that there had been a struggle and Terry had fought back. They found numerous defensive wounds on her arms and upper body, and her face was severely disfigured from a prolonged beating. There were signs of strangulation on her neck, but the forensic expert believes the attacker did not kill her that way. Instead, she died from a severe head injury. She also suffered brutal rape, but it is unclear whether this occurred before or after her murder. DNA traces were found on her bed linen and underwear, but at that time, it was not possible to identify the owner. The analysis methods were still developing and could not be used in the investigation. Additionally, there were no surveillance cameras or geolocation tracking available. The situation became more complicated when local people learned about the tragedy and needed psychological support. The robbery theory was quickly dismissed as many valuables were still intact in the apartment, including conspicuous items. It was clear that robbery was not the motive. The police began interviewing Terry's friends and relatives, looking for people who might have had personal motives such as jealousy, hatred, or revenge. However, Terry McAdams was known to be very kind, friendly, and non-confrontational, and none of her relatives could think of anyone who would want to harm her. Police searched the crime scene but did not find the murder weapon, which forensic experts believe was a hammer or a similar metal tool. They did discover a cigarette butt in the apartment, indicating it likely belonged to the killer. Unfortunately, the technology available at the time was insufficient to extract DNA from the cigarette, and the saliva remnants were too small to analyze. The only useful information obtained was the brand of cigarettes the killer used. One theory being considered is that a serial killer may be responsible for the crimes. Police have looked into Terry's murder and other cases in the nearby area and believe the suspect may not have known the victims, and the attacks appear to have occurred spontaneously. The attacker aimed to avoid detection and leave no evidence behind. So he chose to enter through the back sliding balcony door instead of the main entrance. There were no clear signs of a break-in on the outer window frame. It is probable that he used a tree growing a few meters away from the apartment building's wall to reach the balcony. Unfortunately, aside from these basic observations, police were unable to gather any useful information. Police spoke with the family of the Terry, particularly her mother and sisters, who had the closest bond with her. They were all understandably shocked by the tragedy. Terry, known for her cheerful demeanor, seemed incapable of having enemies, especially ones who would wish to harm her so cruelly. Disturbingly, it appeared that Terry had a sense of impending danger. She was afraid to leave her home, fearing she could become a victim. Tragically, she was killed in her own apartment. As news of the attack spread throughout the city, the local community began to believe that there was a killer on the loose, capable of breaking into any apartment. They suspected that he might have targeted attractive women, stalked them, and attacked them. Ultimately, the community felt that no one was safe, especially young women who might be the next targets. Residents decided to take matters into their own hands. Over the next few months, gun and ammunition sales skyrocketed as more people began arming themselves. Meanwhile, public pressure began to mount on the police for answers. The county sheriff appeared on a local television station, asking anyone with information about the crime to come forward. After Terry's murder was reported on the local news, police received numerous calls, but the information did not help the investigation. Initially, Terry's fiancée Karen was considered the prime suspect, but he was away on business at the time and had an alibi. The police tried to include him in the murder profile to close the case and appease public concern, but this was not possible. Terry's friends could not believe that he could commit such a crime. After his alibi of being away on business was confirmed, he was removed from the suspect list. Police spoke with Terry's relatives to reconstruct a timeline of events that took place on February 12th. Terry arrived at school around 4 p.m. After leaving the university, she got into her car and drove home. Once home, she changed clothes and went shopping, again alone. Although she usually liked to invite her friends along, they were all busy that day. First, she went to the nearest grocery store to buy ingredients for a cake she planned to make for Karen to celebrate Valentine's Day. He was scheduled to return from a business trip the next morning. Store employees confirmed that they saw Terry at the checkout and even provided a receipt for her purchase. The receipt confirmed that she had purchased ingredients for baking. They determined that she left the store at around 6:30 p.m. Police questioned anyone who may have seen her at the time, looking for any suspicious behavior, such as someone following her. However, no one reported anything unusual. It appeared to be a routine shopping trip. Terry paid for her items and walked out. Terry went home and decided not to go out again, as she had scheduled a visit from a repairman the next morning to fix some wiring issues. That evening, none of the neighbors were home, and those who did hear strange noises were unable to fully grasp the seriousness of the situation. The sounds faded relatively quickly, leading people to calm down. Typically, police would look for the killer among the victim's close acquaintances. However, this time it wasn't the case. A few months ago, Terry was preparing for her wedding. Karen had given her a $5,000 engagement ring, but the police were unable to find the ring during their investigation. Initially, it was thought that the ring's disappearance could be a robbery gone wrong. However, further investigation revealed that this theory was unlikely, as nothing else was missing. Given its value, a campaign was launched to find the ring. Approximately 250 flyers with a picture of the ring were distributed to local pawn shops, including those in Fort Worth and Dallas, informing them of the missing jewelry. Despite this effort, no one reported the ring to the police. The police followed up on all potential leads, but none of them came to fruition. All of the suspects questioned provided alibis. The police focused on people with a history of violence who lived in the area. However, the investigation began to stall. Terry's relatives made efforts to promote the case. They regularly reached out to the public through various media channels. They appeared on TV and radio and distributed many flyers, but their efforts yielded no results. Eventually, the murder of Terry McAdams became an unsolved case that was filed in the archives. The Terry's family continued to seek justice, but the police lacked the necessary resources and evidence to advance the investigation. The case went cold for 36 years until 2021, when a team of experienced police and forensic experts was assembled to revisit forgotten cases, utilizing new technologies. Among these cases is that of Terry McAdams. Police used advanced DNA testing methods, allowing them to re-examine old evidence. Biological material from the perpetrator was found on Terry's underwear and bed sheets. She fought back during the attack, leaving traces of the perpetrator's skin under her fingernails. A cigarette was taken from the archives and sent for testing because the killer's saliva might be on it. This thorough analysis helped create a profile of a likely suspect. However, when this profile was checked against the database of known offenders, there were no matches. Terry's family hoped to find the killer who had been on the run for decades. Unfortunately, despite their hopes, the case remained unsolved for many more years. Fortunately, the investigation continued and eventually decided to use a new method, genetic genealogy technology, which required the assistance of the FBI. In August 2023, after exploring all possible options, the police department reached out to the Federal Bureau of Investigations in Dallas for help with the Terry McAdams case. They planned to analyze the DNA samples collected from the crime scene and the victim's body. This genetic testing aimed to create a family tree of the suspect, allowing the investigation to extend beyond the existing database, which only included known offenders. By using genealogical research, police could significantly increase the chances of identifying the suspect's relatives, particularly close ones. This method is considered very effective. At the time this study was conducted, the database had grown to the point where the probability of finding a match was close to 100%. The investigation was successful in identifying a man named Bernard Sharp, an American who had a notable history with the police in the 1980s. At the time of the crime, Bernard was 30 years old and married. He was also a neighbor of Terry, and Karen had a close relationship with him. During the investigation following the arrest, Bernard contacted the police and supported the victim's family. He provided an alibi that the police initially found suspicious, however. His wife later confirmed his alibi, leading to him being cleared of suspicion. Ultimately, all suspicions against him were cleared and the investigation continued without results. On the evening of November 3, 1985, a man called the police, claiming to be Bernard's wife's brother. He reported that he had been shot and needed assistance. After investigating, the police discovered that an armed criminal had attacked him, his sister, and her friend at their home. When the police arrived at the scene, it appeared to be a horrific massacre. He recounted that when he returned home with his sister and her friend, he found Bernard waiting for them with a gun. Bernard opened fire, killing the two women on the spot and wounding Bernard's wife's brother. Bernard's wife's brother was injured in the shooting but escaped to a neighbor's house. His injuries were not life-threatening. Bernard may not have expected his wife's brother to be there, and the shooting may have been premeditated. When Bernard realized his plan had failed, he began shooting at people. In addition to the two dead women, Bernard's wife's brother was also found wounded at the scene. Bernard was shot in the head and died from his injuries on November 3, 2008. Probably, the decision to voluntarily end his life was a factor in the tragic events that unfolded. It is now clear why the attacks on young girls in the city stopped after this tragedy. Bernard was a serial killer. During the investigation, no witnesses came forward to confirm his plans or his connection to the murders of Terry and the other girls. However, several close friends of Bernard's reported that he knew Terry's killer but did not name him. Several months after Terry's murder, Bernard was found dead after killing his wife and her friend, and seriously injuring his wife's brother. Police were unable to locate his body for an autopsy, so they had to take other measures to determine his connection to the murder of Terry McAdams. Police traveled out of state to meet with one of Bernard's registered relatives. Although the man did not want his name linked to the crime, he eventually agreed to provide a DNA sample. Forensic genealogy helped confirm Bernard's guilt. At the time of Bernard's death, police were unable to compare his DNA with the DNA found at the crime scene. They were unable to establish a connection between his previous attacks. Before killing his relatives, Bernard had only used violence and had not used a gun. Furthermore, Bernard's fingerprints were not in the police database, meaning that no matches could be found. Given the nature of the attacks, police suspect he may have been involved in other crimes in his neighborhood. He appears to fit the profile of a serial rapist and murderer. Bernard's criminal record has been turned over to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, an agency known for its crime-solving abilities. However, there has been no confirmed evidence of his involvement in any other cases. For Terry's family, identifying the killer brought them relief. After 39 years, the case was finally closed. This breakthrough was made possible by new technology. Terry's sisters appeared on a local television channel and shared their feelings about the case being solved through several interviews. After nearly 40 years, they say it would have been better to see justice in person. However, they take comfort in knowing that this dangerous criminal stopped his criminal ways long ago and cannot harm anyone again. If he had not stopped, many more innocent women could have been victimized by him over the years. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sheila Vaughn Wees. Sheila Vaughn Wees was born into a loving and respectful family. However, as she grew older, she struggled to instill these values in her daughter, who became stubborn and disobedient, eventually leading to tragedy. On June 10, 1952, Neil Wees and Liz Lenore Allen welcomed their daughter, Sheila. Neil was a World War I veteran who had served in the United States Air Force, and Liz worked as an accountant. The couple had 3 children, Sheila, Bill, and Deborah, and they lived in Minneapolis. Sheila did very well in school and was an excellent student. She then went to Boston University, graduating with a master's degree in political science. After graduation, she worked at a publishing house, where she interacted with several famous people. One day, Sheila met James Mack, a well-known conductor, composer, producer, and arranger in the music industry. At that time, James had children from a previous marriage. But this did not stop him from starting a romantic relationship with Sheila. Their relationship quickly advanced, and they soon got married. After the wedding, the couple moved to a small town in the district of Foran. There, they got involved in community activities and even organized performances in their backyard. In October 1995, her daughter Lois Heather Mack was born. At 43, Sheila was overjoyed to welcome a healthy baby girl. She and her husband, James, showered Lois with love and enrolled her in a top preschool and school. However, some relatives felt that Sheila spoiled her daughter. In 2001, Sheila and James planned a vacation and bought tickets for a Mediterranean cruise, they taking Lois along. Sadly, during the trip, James suffered a serious leg injury that was not properly treated, resulting in partial paralysis. The family later filed a lawsuit against the cruise company for damages, but the legal process took more than 9 years to resolve. On July 20, 2006, the family went on a trip to Athens, where James later died in their hotel room. His death was recorded on August 6, 2006. After his death, James Maxwell was revealed, stating that his daughter Lois, Heather, would inherit $1.5 million. The relationship between Sheila and Lois was strained. Lois often displayed disruptive behavior, throwing tantrums, and even attacking her mother. Since 2008, police reports have documented 35 incidents of domestic violence in Sheila's household. Additionally, Lois often ran away from home, prompting Sheila to file a missing persons report. Friends of Sheila's have reported that she sought help from various psychologists to deal with the situation. During this challenging period, Lois was a middle school student at Oak Park and River Forest School, where her talent for dancing started to show. She generally behaved well in school, but discussions about her relationship with her mother would often lead to her becoming upset. At that time, she was dating a boy named Tommy Schaefer, who was 2 years older than her. Tommy had a history of legal issues due to minor offenses. Tommy had many friends. He was especially close to his cousin Robert Bibbs. In 2011, Sheila's family's lawsuit after James injured his leg on a cruise was settled, resulting in a court judgment awarding her family $340,000 in damages. Since James had died, the money was supposed to go to Lois as stated in his will. However, for reasons that are unclear, the judge ordered the money to be sent to Sheila, which increased the conflict between Lois and Sheila. Her resentment towards her mother grew, and she made numerous threats against Sheila. By 2013, Sheila, concerned for her safety, hired a private investigator because Lois had begun to stalk her, closely monitoring her routes, schedules, and daily routines. There was animosity between them, which made their trip to the Greek coast seem unusual. However, nothing catastrophic happened during that time. In 2014, Tommy and Lois began seeing each other more frequently. Despite Sheila's objections, the situation escalated when Lois stole Sheila's bank card at a hotel party and spent over $1,000. Her mother threatened to report Lois to the police, blaming her for many problems, including the death of her father James. Tensions rose, leading Lois and Tommy to consider a drastic solution to their problems, as Sheila was seen as an obstacle to accessing the family's finances. Despite their strained relationship, Sheila and Lois traveled to Bali together in August 2014. The mother hopes that during her 10 days here, her daughter will reconsider her feelings and stop resenting her. They stayed at the St. Regis Hotel in Bali. On the day they arrived in Bali, Lois texted Tommy, confirming that everything was going according to plan. She then stole her mother's credit card again and bought a $12,000 ticket for Tommy. He arrived on the island just 12 hours later. Meanwhile, Lois was arguing with her mother at the hotel, this time about the news of her pregnancy. Tommy then went to the hotel where Sheila and Lois were staying and got involved in the fight. He hit Sheila in the face with a metal crowbar, killing her instantly. Tommy told his cousin Robert what had happened. Lois and Tommy then put Sheila's body in a suitcase and asked a porter to leave it in the hotel lobby while they called a taxi. The taxi arrived within 10 minutes and they quickly loaded the suitcase containing Sheila's body into the trunk to leave Bali as soon as possible. However, Sheila had previously warned the hotel staff not to accept any payments made with her card without her presence, knowing that Lois often stole her cards. As a result, Lois had no money and the couple were unable to pay for their hotel room. They fled without paying the bill, leaving their passports in the hotel safe. Without these documents, they cannot go to the airport. Lois and Tommy asked the taxi driver to stop at a budget hotel called Rita Valley, which they had just passed. They left their suitcases in the taxi and asked the driver to wait 10 to 15 minutes while they checked in. However, 2 hours had passed, and the driver became impatient and went into the hotel himself, but found their room empty. Lois and Tommy had checked in there but had quickly fled. Frustrated, the taxi driver returned to his car and noticed that the suitcase was leaking a red liquid. Suspecting foul play, he called the police. When the police arrived and opened the suitcase, they discovered Sheila's body inside. Forensic experts later concluded that she had died from facial fractures that had blocked her airway. In addition, her fingers were broken and her body was covered in bruises. The heartbreaking news of Sheila's death reached her family, prompting her sister, Deborah, to begin searching online for information about the case. All she found was a photograph of a suitcase. As details of the murder were reported in the media, public interest grew. Staff at the Rita Suitcase Hotel informed police that a young couple had checked in that night without luggage. When hotel staff asked them to provide their full names for internet use, they complied, knowing that this was required. The police were quick to obtain the couple's information. Police began to go to the room the couple was staying in. Hotel staff said the room had been searched and was empty. However, the couple had secretly returned to the room because they had nowhere else to go and were exhausted. They were sleeping when police found them. Lois and Tommy were taken to the police station for questioning. They gave conflicting stories about being attacked by a gang at the St. Regis Hotel and claimed that the robbers had killed Sheila. While the couple's testimony was inconsistent, the hotel staff and taxi driver remained consistent in their tests. As a result, Lois and Tommy were arrested for murder. Lois became angry, shouting that she was innocent and demanding a lawyer from the United States. The couple appeared on public television in Indonesia, with the report filmed from the police station. Tommy covered his face with a t-shirt, while Lois smiled and smoked a cigarette. They were then transferred to Lessenpar Prison, which houses serious criminals and murderers. Sheila's body was returned home for burial. Her case attracted international attention. During the proceedings, Lois underwent several psychological evaluations, but the results were not considered in the verdict. As the investigation progressed, police discovered more details about the case and the media reported that Lois was pregnant. Then on March 17, 2015, a baby girl named Stella was born. The police allowed Lois to see her baby, but only within the confines of the prison. The baby was healthy, but had an extra finger on his left hand that required surgery to remove. At the hearing, Tommy cried as he claimed that he was defending himself against an aggressive Sheila. He said that she attacked him when she found out about Lois's pregnancy. He also said that Lois often expressed a desire to escape her difficult mother. Lois' testimony contradicted Tommy's. She said she never wanted her mother to die. During the violent fight, she even ran into the bathroom to save her mother. But her testimony was not believed. The judge was presented with evidence that showed Lois and Tommy's criminal intent. Lois had previously suggested that Tommy hire a hitman to kill Sheila and had prepared $40,000 for the purpose. Sheila's autopsy showed obvious injuries and bruises on her hands and face, indicating that Sheila had fought back in self-defense. As a result, Lois Heather Mack and Tommy Schaefer were convicted of premeditated murder. Under Indonesian law, they faced the death penalty. However, the court pardoned them. This leniency was largely due to their newborn child and the couple's deep remorse. Tommy realized the severity of his actions. Sheila's family later visited him in prison, talked to him, and expressed their grief. This interaction caused Tommy to fall into a depression. He began to hate himself and truly regret his choices. His mental state deteriorated, leading to health problems, causing him to lose 11 kilograms and look pale. In April 2015, the final court hearing concluded, and the judge announced the verdict. Lois Heather Mack was sentenced to 10 years in prison, while Tommy Schaefer received an 18-year term. The prosecution described them as ruthless criminals. However, Tommy's good behavior and expressed remorse helped him avoid a longer sentence. As they left the courtroom, Lois posed for photographers from various newspapers and, while drinking a soda that smelled of alcohol, smiled and made jokes. The only thing that troubled her was the fact that she would be released much earlier than Tommy. Meanwhile, Tommy looked at her with anger and wanted nothing to do with her, marking the end of their relationship. Lois, who avoided the death penalty and received a shorter sentence, acted provocatively in prison. She frequently took photos and videos with her friends in prison, enjoying their time together. She managed to get alcohol to drink. To earn money to buy alcohol, she sold food in the prison yard. The prison authorities allowed her to sell food, feeling sorry for her because she was a single mother, but they saw that she did not care much for her daughter, who spent her early years in terrible conditions. Tommy considered Lois a fallen person and mentally ill. One day, reporters secretly entered the prison and recorded footage of Lois having fun and dancing with friends in her cell. The footage quickly went viral on television and online, causing considerable public outrage. In response, Tommy filed a petition with the United States government, requesting that Lois be transferred from the Indonesian prison to a psychiatric hospital in the United States. In the petition, he expressed that he was not seeking sympathy but hoped that their daughter would grow up to be a good person. A year later, Tommy wrote a letter to his friends detailing how Sheila's murder was planned and carried out, and Lois's questionable actions in front of their young daughter Stella. Lois seemed to be focused only on her own gain, with no regard for Stella. The responsibility of looking after Lois' daughter Stella was eventually given to a fellow prisoner, Ashar Puta Melody Sert, who had been released. Ashar quickly adapted to life in Indonesia and married a wealthy local man. Stella was then placed in the care of the couple. The police identified Robert's involvement in Sheila's murder, leading to his quick arrest and trial in 2017. He pleaded guilty to breaking the law and being an accessory to Sheila's murder. During the trial, he revealed that in August 2014, Tommy had come to him for advice on how to carry out a murder. As a result, Robert received a 9-year prison sentence. Sheila's family was pleased with the outcome. While in prison, Lois ended her relationship with Tommy. In October 2021, Lois completed 7 years in an Indonesian prison and was paroled. Her reunion with her 6-year-old daughter, Stella, was a moment of liberation for her. Stella lived in Indonesia for another month before being extradited to the United States with her mother. At that point, her daughter no longer needed a guardian. Upon arriving in Chicago, Lois was arrested at the airport by FBI agents. She faced new charges of conspiracy to murder a U.S. citizen abroad and obstruction of justice. Lois attempted to draw media attention to her arrest, believing it was unfair, especially since she had already served time in Indonesia. She felt it was unfair that the police had brought new charges against her. At her first court appearance in the United States, Lois denied all charges against her. Her attorney, Keith Vogel-Barova, argued for her to be released on bail. In response, District Judge Charnell agreed to consider the appeal and heard from Assistant District Attorney Terry Keeney. The court needed a reasonable amount of time to make a decision. A week later, Lois reached a plea deal with police and pleaded guilty to conspiracy to murder a U.S. citizen abroad. A hearing then took place in Illinois Federal Court. District Judge Matthew Kelly considered the prosecution's recommendation for a 28-year prison sentence, minus 7 years for time served in Indonesia. The judge then sentenced Lois Heather Mack to 26 years in prison, ordered her to pay $2,278 in restitution, and fined her $50,000. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Marco Marialini. Marco Marialini was born on April 13, 1959, in the town of Brescia, Italy. His father worked as a builder, and his mother Maria Lini was a housewife. She was obsessed with cleanliness and constantly tidied the house. Everything had to be in its place, and any mess could cause her to have a nervous breakdown. Marco had an older sister who was 2 years older. After Marco was born, his mother felt overwhelmed and struggled to keep the house clean. She suffered from emotional distress and may have suffered from obsessive-compulsive disorder, although she did not recognize her condition and never sought medical help. A month after Marco's birth, he was placed in the care of his paternal grandparents, where he lived for 2 years. His parents eventually brought him back home, believing their situation had improved and that they could handle the challenges of parenting. Once back home, Maria attempted to care for Marco, but he was very active and often caused trouble. He didn't listen to her and frequently threw tantrums. Frustrated, Maria sometimes lost her temper with him. Although Marco's father tried to step in during these conflicts, Maria dismissed his attempts. He is a calm and gentle man who always avoids conflicts with his wife to keep the peace. In the family of Marie, a serious incident occurred. Maria was trying to calm Marco, who was throwing another tantrum for no apparent reason and wouldn't stop. In a moment of frustration, she grabbed him and accidentally threw him out of an open window. Marco fell several floors and miraculously caught on the clotheslines located below, which saved his life. As Marco grew older, he gained weight. He didn't go on diets or actively try to lose weight, but he felt uncomfortable in his larger body. During his teenage years, he began to compare himself to his friends and felt disgusted by any girl who weighed more than he did. Additionally, Marco wanted his girlfriend to have a strong sex drive, equal to his own. However, finding someone who met these criteria was challenging. Most of the girls he met were either too heavy or not up to his standards. Because of this, Marco had a hard time finding a partner until he was 19, when he met Lucia. Marco and Lucia met in 1978. Lucia was short and weighed 100 pounds, and Marco fell in love with her petite figure and sought a close relationship. However, when Lucia first undressed in front of Marco, he was disappointed in her figure. Despite this, Marco continued to date her because he appreciated her calm, modest, and composed demeanor. Meanwhile, he continued to search for his ideal partner. A few months after starting their relationship, Marco joined the army and was stationed in Pisa, Italy. Believing that he would quickly find new love elsewhere, he stopped contacting Lucia. After a few months, when Lucia started dating someone new, Marco realized that he didn't want to lose her. He contacted her again and even proposed. Marco admitted that he decided to marry Lucia because he thought he could change her to fit his preferences. They got married in 1980, and soon after, Marco focused on controlling Lucia's weight. He believed that 45 kilograms was too heavy for a woman, so Lucia agreed to go on a diet. Marco restricted her food intake and weighed her regularly. When she lost weight, he praised her and expressed his love. However, if she gained weight, he became extremely harsh. After a few months, Lucia reached a dangerously low weight of 33 kilograms, which made Marco happy. Then, unexpectedly, Lucia became pregnant despite her low weight. Marco accepted this and allowed her to eat freely, he realizing that she shouldn't be restricted during her pregnancy. As Lucia's belly began to grow, Marco became unhappy with it. Their intimacy began to falter. During this time, Marco often fantasized about women who were very thin, like skeletons. He often fantasized about being able to see the woman's spine. As Lucia entered her final months of pregnancy, Marco began dating other women, especially those who were not only thin but also anorexic. However, he soon realized that these women were not right for him. Because they have unpleasant personalities and, most importantly, lack interest in intimacy. They make their own choices about food and eating, which is contrary to Marco's desire to have complete control over his diet. In 1981, Lucia gave birth to a daughter, and a year later, their family welcomed their second child. After giving birth, Lucia gained a significant amount of weight, causing Marco to increasingly distance himself from her. He found her post-pregnancy body unattractive. He eventually decided to divorce her, wanting to ensure that their children would stay with their mother. The divorce was amicable. Marco then began looking for a new partner, a journey that lasted nearly 10 years. During this time, he opened his own antique shop. In 1994, dating through newspaper ads began to become popular. Marco, 35, posted an ad describing who he was looking for. A very thin woman, not anorexic, aged 18 to 50. He received responses from 21 women and invited them on a date. Among them, he was most interested in Monica, who was from Sicily and 5 years younger than him. She was 1.72 meters tall and weighed 45 kilograms. She was friendly and outgoing. Curious about Marco's unusual ad, she decided to respond. Monica and Marco began to see each other regularly. While Monica viewed their relationship as casual, Marco wanted something more serious. He tried to convince her to move in with him. After a while, Monica decided to move in with Marco. In the same year, he started facing challenges at work. He had fallen into debt, and his antique shop was losing money. To help him, Monica lent him 76 million lira, the amount for which she sold the house. This was a large sum, considering that the average salary in Italy at that time was around 2 million lira. Although Marco proposed to Monica, she rejected him. At first, they lived as a normal couple, but after a while, Marco began to interfere with her diet. He said that a 1.72 m tall girl weighing only 33 kilograms was beautiful. But he set her goal weight at 38 kilograms. Monica agreed, Marco still secretly hoping she would reach 33 kilograms. It is unclear why he set that number. Marco limited Monica's meals to once a day, usually consisting of a plate of green salad or vegetables. He monitored the food in their house, marking the cereal jars and making sure Monica did not eat anything without his knowledge. He weighed her several times the day and became angry if he noticed her gaining a significant amount of weight. If her weight increased, he would force her to vomit and sometimes resort to physical violence. On weekends, the couple often eats out. Marco enjoys a hearty meal, ordering an appetizer, a second course, and a dessert. Monica, on the other hand, limits herself to a vegetable salad without dressing or unsweetened green tea. This is her routine, even on holidays. After a few months of dieting, she reached her goal weight, but soon after, her weight started to climb to 40 kilograms. Monica kept her diet a secret from everyone, including her parents and friends. As she began to lose weight, her relatives noticed and began to ask about her health. To avoid their questions, she changed the subject and eventually isolated herself, cutting off all contact with her friends and ignoring their calls. Over time, her health deteriorated. She felt weak, had no motivation to get out of bed, and her period stopped. Monica was constantly hungry and obsessed with food. She resorted to stealing, sneaking small dry crackers that Marco never counted. One day, she even ate a whole raw onion. When the Marco discovered that food was missing, he punished Monica severely. He forced her to have sex, physically abused her, and made her sleep on the floor. After 2 years of enduring this treatment, Monica felt completely drained. She finally made the decision to leave the house. When she told Marco that she wanted to end their relationship and return to her parents, he responded by saying that she would have to kill him for that to happen. He then threatened her with brutal revenge if she attempted to escape. In the spring of 1996, Marco and Monica went to a restaurant. Marco ordered a plate of spaghetti, while Monica chose a green salad and asked for no oil or seasoning. While they were waiting for their food, Marco said he needed to go to the bathroom. After Marco left the table, Monica suddenly took his plate of spaghetti and started eating it ravenously. When Marco returned from the restroom, he became extremely angry at Monica's actions. He snatched the plate from her hands and demanded that she calm down. In response, Monica rushed into the restaurant's kitchen, where the cooks and waitstaff were busy. She grabbed a plate of food and began eating with her hands. Marco found her there and brought her back to their table. He shouted at her and then slapped her hard across the face. The restaurant staff and other customers were puzzled and merely watched the chaotic scene in silence. After returning home, Marco decided to punish Monica. He stripped her and told her to sleep on the floor while he went to the bedroom to sleep comfortably in his warm bed. That night, Monica picked up a heavy hammer and attacked Marco while he was sleeping, hitting him on the head before fleeing the house. Hours later, Marco woke up with a severe headache and saw blood near him. Realizing that Monica was gone, he ran to his neighbor, who called an ambulance. Marco was taken to the hospital. Fortunately, he was not seriously injured and recovered fairly quickly. The police arrested Monica and took her into custody. During the interrogation, Marco defended Monica, acknowledging that he had been cruel to her. Marco said that there had been some misunderstandings in their relationship and that they would work things out. At trial, Monica was found guilty and sentenced to 2 years of house arrest. She then moved to her parents' home in Domodossola, a city in northern Italy, 200 kilometers away from Marco's home. During her house arrest, Monica was still able to use a phone. Although she never contacted Marco, he called her regularly. At first, he seemed concerned, showing concern for her well-being. However, over time, his calls became too frequent. During one conversation, Marco confessed that he could not live without her and wanted to see her again. Monica rejected his advances, but he persisted. In 1997, Marco wrote and published his first book, The Anorexia Hunter. The original cover photo that Marco chose featured a healthy, chubby man holding a skinny woman. He based the characters on the American cartoon Popeye the Sailor. However, due to copyright issues, Marco was unable to use the image, so the publisher released the book with a different cover. Marco has publicly stated that the book is an autobiography that reflects his real life. He expressed that he felt deprived of love and care since he was a child. He has a complicated relationship with his mother. Although he hates her, he sometimes feels affection for her. Marco describes his father as a weak and indecisive man. Marco wrote about his relationship with Lucia. In the book, he called Monica Barbara. He discussed the theme of control and power over girls. According to the story, the author killed Barbara. During the book's launch, Marco publicly declared himself a monster who needed to be stopped. An editorial writer who was present at the event found Marco's tone very offensive. After reading the book, the editorial writer went to the police to express his concerns. However, the police dismissed his report, believing that Barbara's murder was completely fictional. At the time, Marco had no criminal record, making it impossible to charge him based solely on the content of his book. When Marco's autobiography was released, Monica was still under house arrest for another year. Marco sent her a signed copy of his book with the message, "Love and Hate." He continued to call her, and Monica recorded their conversations on a dictaphone. Concerned about his mental health, she urged Marco to see a doctor. During his therapy sessions, Marco opened up about his obsessive thoughts and troubling fantasies, revealing the truth about his life. He was admitted to a psychiatric hospital for several weeks, but after his treatment, he returned home feeling disillusioned with medicine, realizing that the medication had not helped him. In 1998, Monica, who was 29 years old, was finally released from house arrest and allowed to travel around the country. Marco continued to contact her, pleading for a meeting. Although Monica initially refused, she realized that he wouldn't give up easily. Eventually, she agreed to one last meeting with him but specified her conditions. It had to be during the day in a crowded place. On July 14, 1998, Monica met Marco at a small beach in Verbania on the shores of Lake Maggiore, where young couples were swimming and sunbathing. They talked for a while, but then Marco began to pressure her to return to their previous relationship. Monica stood firm in her refusal, and in response, Marco started to threaten her. Monica and Marco were sitting on the shore when she suddenly stood up and ran away. Marco quickly caught up with her and knocked her to the ground. She screamed for help, but he covered her mouth with his hand. Although there were many witnesses, no one intervened. Marco then took out a knife and stabbed Monica 22 times, killing her on the spot. The witnesses called the police, but by the time the ambulance and police arrived, Marco had already swum out to sea. Officers using a lifeboat on the beach caught Marco. During questioning, Marco admitted to his crime, claiming that he had no intention of killing Monica. He said that he came to the beach hoping to convince her to return to the relationship. If she refused, he planned to kidnap her using his car parked nearby. Police found ropes, chains, knives, locks, and duct tape, suggesting a premeditated plan that ultimately failed. Marco denied wanting to run away after the murder. He mentioned that he tried to end his life but failed. During the investigation, comic book drawings were discovered in his home. In these drawings, he depicted himself as a large ball and the girl as a thin line. His artwork expressed mockery towards women. During his conversation with the journalist, Marco showed no remorse for his crime, stating that he felt he had no other option and did what he had to do. However, Marco acknowledged that he posed a danger to society. Marco Mariolini was found to be sane and guilty of murder, he receiving a 30-year prison sentence. While incarcerated, there was a time when he refused to eat, took laxatives, and lost weight down to 44 kilograms, but later he regained it. He was a problematic inmate, starting a fire in his cell and causing minor trouble for the guards. As a result, he was transferred to different prisons multiple times. Marco wrote letters claiming he should not be released because he would kill again, but he later denied this and then wrote similar letters once more. Italian director Matteo Rone was inspired by Marco's horror stories to create the film First Love. Released in 2004. Although it did not receive major awards, it drew attention to Marco's past. In 2021, there was an article written about Marco's early release and it was revealed that he had been transferred to a mental hospital. In late 2002, journalists approached Marco for an interview. During the interview, he expressed a desire to forget his past experiences with women. The journalists noticed that he seemed confused, often unable to answer their questions. His mental state may have been affected by the effects of medication. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Denise Amber Lee. Nathan and Denise's family lives in the SRO Soda District, located near the west coast of Florida. They started dating in their senior year of high school. Nathan is a talented athlete. He is very funny and often makes people laugh. Denise, on the other hand, is very calm. She is known for being smart and kind. On their first Valentine's Day together, Nathan gave Denise a heart-shaped ring. Soon after, the couple got married and settled in a quiet area in Latura Venue, where they rented a house. By 2008, the couple had 2 children, Noah, 2 years old, and Adam, 6 months old. Nathan worked 3 jobs to provide for the family, while Denise focused on running the household. She loved her children and her husband very much. Although the economy was difficult at times, the couple was still happy together. Thursday, January 17, 2008, Nathan left for work early that morning. Around 11:00 a.m., during his break, he called his wife and they talked for about 5 minutes while Noah was cutting his hair on the back porch. They talked about the nice weather, and Nathan asked Denise to open the windows to let in some fresh air. She told him that she had already done so. Everything was normal, and there were no problems. After hanging up, Nathan went back to work and finished his shift at 3:00 p.m. He then called Denise back to let her know that he was on his way home, but there was no answer. During the drive home, he tried to call her 8 more times. When Nathan got home, he found all the windows closed. Denise was not home. He found her keys and phone on the living room sofa. Like most people, Denise would never leave the house without those items, especially when there were small children home alone. Nathan found the 2 boys lying side by side in their upstairs crib. There was no sign of forced entry or struggle, and since the children were too young to understand what had happened, he sensed something was wrong. At 3:29 p.m., Nathan called the police and reported the situation. He told them he was in Northport at the Latura venue and had just returned from work. He realized his wife was missing and he couldn't find her. The children were with him, but he had no information on where she might be, despite a thorough search of the house. Soon after, the police arrived at Nathan's house. The officers began knocking on neighbors' doors to see if anyone had noticed anything unusual. To everyone's surprise, a valuable lead emerged. Around 2:00 p.m., Jennifer Eckhart, a neighbor, was watching television when she saw a dark green Chevrolet slowly driving down the street. The car drove around the front of her house about 5 times. The car stood out because of its distinctive black front liner, which was added to protect it from minor damage. The neighbor sensed something was wrong and stepped into the front yard just as the car pulled into Nathan and Denise's driveway. Jennifer stared at the driver, thinking he was just looking for a house and had finally found it. Feeling reassured, she went back inside to watch TV. However, after about 10 minutes, she stepped outside again just as the car drove away. Although she did not catch a glimpse of the passenger, she carefully observed the driver's face and later gave the police a brief description of him. After calling 911, Nathan reached out to Rick Goform, a police officer in nearby Charlotte County. Within 30 minutes, Rick organized a large search for Denise, involving officers, search dogs, patrol units, and even a helicopter. The Northport area was put on alert. Denise was declared missing, and posters were distributed to raise awareness of her disappearance. Local police were instructed to closely monitor a dark green Chevrolet and its driver, described as a chubby white man in his 30s. More than 2 hours passed without any sign of Denise or any other clues to aid the search. At 6:14 p.m., police received a call from Denise. She said she was in a car that was being taken somewhere. She informed police that she did not know the kidnapper, gave her full name, and mentioned the street where she lived. The police attempted to trace the call. Unfortunately, since the call was made from an old phone without GPS, they were unable to pinpoint the exact location. However, they were able to identify the registrant of the number as Michael Lee King, a 36-year-old man. Michael was recently divorced and was raising his 12-year-old son on his own. It is important to note that he has a low IQ of around 76, which makes him mentally retarded. He was in a childhood accident when he was 6 years old. He suffered a serious brain injury while skiing. Despite these challenges, Michael has lived a normal life and has never had any legal problems. Denise gave her name and home address in the call to the police, and the police immediately forwarded this information. The recording of the call was passed on to Denise's father, who recognized his daughter's voice, confirming that she was in danger. It was clearly Michael who had kidnapped Denise. During the call, Michael mentioned his cousin, Harold. Suddenly, After Denise's call ended at 18:23, the police received another call from Harold's 17-year-old daughter, Sabrina. Sabrina said that her uncle Michael stopped by to visit her father, and a woman jumped out of his car. Michael pushed her in. Then he borrowed a shovel and a can of gasoline from Harold. At around 6:00 p.m., Michael did indeed show up at his cousin Harold's house. He parked his car on the side of the road. He asked for gas, a flashlight, and a shovel. He explained that the lawnmower had gotten stuck in the mud in front of his house. As Harold was handing him some things, they heard a woman screaming in distress from the car. Harold asked Michael what was going on, but Michael dismissed it, saying that Harold didn't need to worry. Michael then got into the driver's seat and drove away quickly. Initially, Harold thought that he might have just witnessed a family argument between Michael and his new girlfriend. However, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling about the situation. To avoid making a mistake, Harold decided to go home first to see if Michael was okay. When he arrived, Michael wasn't there, and he wasn't in the front yard either. Meanwhile, their daughter, Sabrina, was worried about the uncut lawn, which prompted her to call the police. Police became concerned when they learned about the items Michael had taken from Harold, prompting them to intensify their search. At 6:30 p.m., just 7 minutes after Sabrina's call, 911 operator received another call from Jane Kowalski, who was driving south on the freeway. She noticed something disturbing. She reported that while stopped at a red light on Chamberlain Street, another driver pulled up next to her, and she heard a woman screaming loudly from inside the car. Jane described the car as blue, like a Chevrolet from the early 2000s. The driver was a light-skinned man, and there was a woman in the back seat who was screaming and banging on the windows. Jane then reported that the driver was about to turn left, and the dispatcher advised Jane to follow him closely and keep an eye on him. Moments later, Jane reported that the man accelerated away, making a sharp left turn onto Taldeblay, leaving her no time to react. Now, she was unsure if she could catch up with him because of the heavy traffic on the highway, which made driving very difficult. Jane believes she witnessed a kidnapping. She accurately described the driver and the make of the car. However, she got the color of the car wrong. She mistook green for blue. She observed a man turning the steering wheel with one hand while pressing the head of someone in the back seat with the other. She heard someone screaming and banging on the window. Jane then caught up with Michael's Chevrolet, and both cars remained stationary for a while, waiting for the red light. Eventually, Jane began to move, and Michael changed lanes to follow her. Jane deliberately drove slowly, thinking that the Chevrolet driver would pass her, allowing her to follow. But at that moment, Michael also slowed down and turned towards Mishtar 75. Jane then called the 911 operator and provided the location of Michael's car. But the situation then took a tragic and unexpected turn. Jane provided information to the 911 operator about the location of the kidnapper's car. However, officers were never dispatched to the location she provided. A recording of Jane's conversation with the operator shows the office was very noisy. The operator relayed the information to two dispatchers while loudly expressing frustration with them. Both dispatchers admitted to receiving the information, but did not send patrol units to the designated area. The dispatchers later explained that Jane's call came during a shift change and that they were understaffed at the time. The dispatchers were eventually suspended without pay. A search helicopter and several patrol units were on standby, but no one informed them of the exact location of Michael's car. The next day, Jane saw a photo of Michael on the news and immediately recognized him as the driver she had seen the day before. She reached out to the police, introducing herself as the woman who had called 911 the previous day, and asked if they needed any more information. To her surprise, the officers were unaware of her call and did not know who she was. Now, let's go back to the day before when Denise was still in the car. At 5:50 p.m., 20 minutes after Jane's call, 911 received a fifth call. Michael's cousin, Harold, reported that he wasn't sure what the problem was, but it sounded like someone needed medical assistance. He mentioned a green 1995 Chevrolet and indicated that a woman inside the car appeared to need help. Chevrolet called from a payphone and shared all the details, but he didn't want to reveal his identity. His information largely matched what his daughter Sabrina had provided. Over the next 2 hours, the officers found no leads. At 21:16, Officer Edward Pope was on Tala de Blaze Street when he saw a green Chevrolet speeding and making a sharp turn to the south. The officer pursued the car and managed to block it with his own vehicle, causing Michael to crash. After the accident, Officer Edward ordered Michael out of the car. After Michael got out of the car, he was soaked to the waist, and his boots were covered in mud. In his pocket, the police found the phone that Denise had used to call 911, but it had lost its battery. The police checked the back seat of the car, but found no sign of Denise. The Chevrolet Camaro was towed by the Nordport Authority for a detailed inspection. Inside the vehicle, officers discovered a SIM card and a gasoline canister. The back seat and a blanket showed signs of staining. Denise's fingerprints were found on the exterior of the driver's window. On the front of the car, there were blood spatters, hair strands, and a strange, thick substance. Additionally, hair that had been pulled out was found stuffed in a pocket behind the driver's seat, along with Denise's heart-shaped ring, which she had always worn and never removed. Police believe Denise intentionally left this evidence to help ensure her kidnapper was caught. Michael was identified as the primary and sole suspect in the kidnapping. He refused to confess, would not reveal any information about Denise's whereabouts, and maintained his innocence. During interrogation, he remained silent. Michael's cousin Harold went to the police station to convince Michael to reveal to Denise's family where he had hidden her. Michael eventually spoke up and claimed that he and Denise had been intimate. He said that they had been held hostage by a group of masked criminals who eventually killed Denise. With a search warrant for Michael's home, the police thoroughly examined it and discovered a blanket with white spots and some blood on it. DNA testing confirmed that the blood was Michael's. In the bedroom and kitchen, pieces of adhesive tape with hair attached were discovered. The DNA from the hair roots matched that of Denise. On January 18, the day after Denise went missing, a canine unit searched the area near Blaze Street. Searchers found 2 piles of sand with visible blood. They then excavated and discovered Denise's body buried 3 feet deep in a swampy grave. She suffered a gunshot wound to the head. A cartridge case was found nearby in the grass. Denise's stained underwear and shirt were also found. DNA analysis confirmed that the biological material matched Michael's DNA. Denise's autopsy results showed that she died from head injuries. Blood and hair found outside Michael's car indicated that the car was close by when Denise was shot. Additionally, aspirin was found in Denise's lungs, indicating that she was alive and breathing for some time after the injury. She fought valiantly for her life, suffering numerous wounds and bruises while defending herself against Michael. Marks on her wrists indicated that she had been bound by Michael. Her hair and 2 pieces of duct tape were recovered, along with biological material from Michael found at the scene. Michael was on trial for first-degree murder, rape, and kidnapping, but he pleaded not guilty to all charges. His lawyers attempted to paint him as a hard-working single father with no prior legal issues. The defense said a childhood accident in which he injured his frontal lobe while skiing is believed to have affected his behavior. His family noted that Michael's attitude changed dramatically after this incident. When he was 13, he nearly killed his brother with a bow and arrow while imitating a cartoon character. After his childhood accident, he needed special education services for children with low IQs. Michael experienced severe headaches and constant ringing in his ears. A friend testified in court that in the days leading up to the abduction, Michael showed signs of paranoia, claiming that neighbors were spying on him through his windows. The defense attorneys pointed out that individuals who have suffered frontal lobe injuries are more prone to making mistakes, taking unnecessary risks, struggling with aggression control, and having trouble distinguishing between reality and fantasy. Comprehensive cognitive tests confirmed that Michael had a very low IQ. However, he still understood the concepts of actions and their consequences. Michael's defense arguments quickly weakened, especially with the shocking blood and DNA evidence presented against him in court. Additional evidence, including hair strands and Denise's heart-shaped ring hidden in a seat pocket. Family Michael's younger brother Jim took on the responsibility of raising Michael's son, who was 13 at the time. The boy needed psychological support to cope with his mother's abandonment and the impact of his father's actions. Denise's family sued Charlotte County police dispatchers for serious misconduct in the case. The case was settled out of court for $1 million. A few months after Denise's death, her husband, Nathan, established the Denise Amber Lee Foundation. He spent the next several years traveling the country, advocating for standardized training for emergency dispatchers. His dedication to this cause is truly admirable. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Anita Knutson. Anita Knutson, 18, had just finished her first year at Minot State University. She is intelligent, hardworking, and well-liked. She majored in education and aims to become a kindergarten teacher. Her family and friends believed this profession suited her perfectly because she loved working with young children. She often cared for the neighbors' kids. Anita shared an apartment near the university with a childhood friend. To help cover her tuition and living expenses without burdening her parents, she took on 2 jobs, one in retail and another at a local hotel. Despite her busy schedule, she maintains an active lifestyle and has many friends. In 2007, Anita was eagerly anticipating the summer break. She missed her home and family very much, although she regularly calls her parents and keeps in touch with her siblings. When her mother called on Saturday, June 3, she did not respond. She had a shift at the hotel that day, so her mother thought she might be busy or simply missed the call. However, on Sunday, not being able to contact Anita caused concern, especially since she did not show up for work. Worried, her father, Gordon, decided to travel to Maine to check on her. As Gordon approached the building where Anita lived, he noticed that the window of her room, located to the right of the front entrance, was broken. Getting closer, he saw a hunched figure of a girl sitting on the bed. Although her face was not visible from the window, but he recognized it was his daughter. He called her name, but when she didn't respond, he reached through the window to touch her. To his horror, he realized she was dead. Her body was cold. In a panic, he contacts the homeowner, Laura Knapp, and waits for her to unlock the door. Once inside the room, it is clearly too late to save Anita. The police were called to the scene and determined that Anita had been stabbed twice, once in the chest and once from the side. There were no other signs of injury or struggle. It was unclear whether she had been wearing a robe or if it had been thrown over her after she collapsed onto the bed following the attack. During the investigation, important evidence was found at the crime scene, including Anita's mobile phone and a folding knife covered in dried blood, which was discovered under the blankets on the bed beside the wall. Notably, several of Anita's valuables, such as cash, her laptop, and digital camera, remained untouched, shows that theft was not the motive for the attack. Investigators concluded that the window was not the entry point for the killer. Even though the window was left open and was wide enough for an adult to crawl through, a maintenance worker named Marty Annell found a window screen on the ground outside the previous night. The screen had been cut into the shape of a capital L. Marty had picked it up with a knife, intending to fix or replace it, but had forgotten about it until Gordon arrived the next day to check on his daughter. Marty later gave the cut screen to the police. Despite the damaged screen, investigators were not convinced there had been a break-in through the window. No evidence of entry was found, and the dusty windowsills, both inside and outside, were undisturbed. This suggests that mesh panel was cut after the murder, indicating the killer likely did not use the window to enter. It appeared the crime scene was staged, and the murderer probably used the door. When Gordon entered the apartment, he found the front door locked, which required a key to open and close. There were 4 individuals to have keys to the front door. One belonged to Anita, another was her roommate, Nicole Rice, who was away visiting parents for the weekend. The third belonged to the landlady, Laura Knapp, and the 4th person is the maintenance worker, Marty. Marty caught investigators off guard because he was the one who discovered the window grill. He claimed he did not see Anita on the bed next to the window when he picked up the screen from outside. However, Gordon said that as he approached the building, he could clearly see Anita through the window. Initial DNA tests on items such as a pocket knife and other areas of the room yielded no clues, suggesting that investigators would need to look for the killer using other methods. They began looking into Anita's personal life and eventually concluded that she had been murdered. Cell phone records and forensic analysis revealed that Anita was texting a friend, Michael Van, early on Sunday morning, more than a day before her body was found. The text indicated that Michael, who had a romantic interest in her, sent a message asking her to reply to his previous message. However, Anita replied that she didn't know what to say. Their exchange was personal, but not flirtatious. The last text from him arrived on Anita's phone at 4:53. It turned out that Michael wanted more than just friendship, but friends stated that the two only communicated platonically. Michael isn't the only one who wants to date Anita. Tyler Schmaltz, a college student, he is shy and awkward, also has feelings for her. He admitted to having few friends, and Anita was one of the few who showed him kindness. They attended prom together in high school, but their relationship never turned romantic. Tyler admitted during a police interview that although he had long liked Anita, that did not stop him from being close friends with her. In fact, he even moved to the same apartment complex to be nearer to her. After the crime, Anita's family found Tyler's behavior unusual. He lingered in the cordoned-off area for an extended period, frequently reaching out to the police for updates. He even created a 20-minute video in memory of Anita and shared it online. Additionally, he organized and took part in fundraisers to cover advertising costs for information related to the investigation. He was questioned multiple times by detectives, and his DNA and fingerprints were collected and compared to those found at the crime scene, but there were no matches. Shortly after Anita was found, a witness reported seeing a man running away from the crime scene around the time of her murder. The police shared a description of this man and attempted to locate him. A local resident came forward, stating that he regularly jogged along that route at the same time. However, this lead was eventually set aside. Meanwhile, a construction crew working in the adjacent building had a clear view of Anita's apartment complex. DNA samples were collected from all the workers, and none matched the evidence. Investigators interviewed people close to Anita, including her close friend and roommate, Nicole Rice. The two had been friends since high school and were very close at the time. Nicole insists their friendship is still good and disagreements between them were only minor. In contrast, those who knew Anita described their relationship differently, suggesting that they argued frequently. Anita's father, Gordon, revealed that he had installed a lock on her bedroom door just a month before her death because she was worried about her safety at home. Many speculated that Nicole felt jealous of the attention Anita received, not only from their mutual friends, but also from the boys who were interested in her. Anita was uncomfortable with Nicole frequently inviting men over to their apartment and leaving them alone in her room for a day or two. Anita's friends were aware that Nicole sometimes had heated arguments with these men that turned into insults. Additionally, text messages from Nicole indicated that she was misrepresenting their relationship. In one message, Nicole stating that she was almost never at home and that she had everything in place. The police reported that over 4 people were interviewed and several DNA samples were collected from Anita's nails, the window, and the knife. At that time, these samples did not match any known individuals, but were preserved for future analysis. The investigation has not identified a prime suspect and has ruled out several individuals. For instance, Tyler was cleared from the suspect list. Although his behavior was deemed peculiar and his feelings for Anita could be seen as obsessive, there is no evidence that he was involved in the crime. Detectives concluded that this was not a case involving emotions. They also believe that the perpetrator did not enter through the window. Whoever the perpetrator was, they had a key to the apartment and could have locked the door when they left. Tyler appeared genuinely eager to assist in the investigation and find the murderer. He had no motive to harm Anita and willingly participated in interviews with both the police and the media following her death. He admitted to being in love with her, though she did not feel the same. They were merely good friends. Marty, the building maintenance worker, was also questioned multiple times, and information about him was gathered. This continued until January 2009, when Marty was found dead in his apartment. There has been much speculation over the years about Marty's involvement in the murder. His sudden death further increased suspicions that he could not bear his guilt. Anita's case remains unsolved, and for nearly 15 years, there have been no new leads. Tyler was not the only one seeking answers. Anita's family also gave interviews and shared any information, even small details, that might help resolve the case. Anita's brother Daniel, who was very close to her, died in April 2013 from emotional pain after her passing. The family believes that the death of his younger sister and his longing for her led to his severe and prolonged depression. Anna, the youngest sibling, said that Anita's passing had a serious impact on Daniel, making his life no longer the same. As a result, the family endured the loss of 2 children. In the fall of 2021, the investigation got a new lead when the American crime show Cold Justice took over Anita's case. Cold Justice is known for revisiting unsolved cases, which often leads to the arrest of suspects and obtaining confessions from them. The show's team traveled to Minot, North Dakota, to search for people who knew Anita. The Cold Justice team identified 4 main suspects in the case: Tyler, who they quickly re-interviewed and dismissed as a suspect; Michael, who had been attempting to date Anita and was the last person to communicate with her; Marty; and Nicole. Detective Maynata and the investigative team found no evidence of a conflict between Anita and Michael, leading them to eliminate him as a suspect. They also believe Marty's claim that he could not see Anita from the outside window is true. Police reports indicated that when they arrived, the lights in Anita's bedroom were off before sunset, making Marty unable to see her at that time. With Marty no longer a suspect, attention turned to Nicole. In 2021, she was arrested at the Maine Air Force Base, where she worked, and charged with the murder of Anita. The sheriff of Maine testified in court that after 15 years of investigation and following various leads, they had finally taken the suspect into custody. Nicole was taken to the Ward County Jail. 2 lead detectives were assigned to Anita's case and had been investigating it for the past few years. Thanks to Cold Justice's assistance, the case has made new progress, and now has an arrest warrant for Nicole. Nicole was released on $125,000 bail and is currently awaiting trial. She has the support of her husband, who has encouraged her to drop the charges. However, authorities presented strong evidence suggesting her involvement in the murder. As the investigation begins, it becomes clear that Nicole is the only person in Anita's life with whom she has conflict. Text messages between them revealed increasing hostility. Friends noted that while Anita and Nicole were very close in their youth, their relationship had soured after moving in together. Witnesses recalled arguments involving alarm clocks and fish tanks, saying Nicole had called Anita derogatory names over the years. Nicole initially avoided arrest due to her alibi. Her parents claimed she had spent the entire weekend of June 2 to 4 on their farm, which coincided with the time of Anita's death. However, a witness reported seeing Nicole at a bar about 45 minutes away from town on June 2, 2007. Nicole later told that she had returned to her apartment to get some clothes. During a preliminary hearing in late 2022, Detective Talbot presented statements from people who knew Nicole and Anita at the time of Anita's death. He pointed out inconsistencies in Nicole's testimony, which led to her being retried and questioned as a suspect. A shocking detail was revealed by Nicole's ex-boyfriend. He recalled that at a party after Anita's death, friends of both confronted Nicole and asked her about what had happened. In a drunken state, Nicole laughed and claimed she was guilty in front of everyone. In 2008, 9 statements were submitted regarding the confession Nicole made at that party. Her boyfriend also reported to the police about the incident that transpired there. However, efforts to have Nicole repeat her confession while sober were unsuccessful. Ultimately, the judge concluded that there was sufficient evidence to charge Nicole when the case goes to trial, expected to occur in mid to late 2023. Nicole's attorney, Philip Becker, was expected to point the finger at a new suspect named Devon Hall, who had been arrested for breaking into homes. Officer Mainata, who arrested Devon Hall, noted in his report that Devon claimed he had been to many houses in the area. Philip also pointed to a statement from a witness who saw a man running from the area around the time of Anita's murder, claiming the description matched Devon. The defense insisted that it was Devon who broke into the apartment and killed Anita. However, a number of reports from previous investigators and even FBI analysts supported the theory that Devon was not involved. Investigators ruled out Devon as a suspect after receiving video evidence of him being at the railway station in Minot on the evening of Anita's murder. Therefore, the person seen running away could not have been him. It is likely that the defense will try to find new arguments, especially since opinions about Anita's death differ. The prosecutor's office believes that Anita died early in the morning of June 3, shortly after sending her last SMS. If Devon was the killer, then Anita must have died much later, after he had already arrived by train on the evening of June 3. Based on the information released in this investigation, the case against Nicole remains unclear. No trial date has been set at this time. If Nicole Rice is convicted, she faces a sentence of life in prison without parole. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the case of Maria Lehner and Laura Dalton. There are individuals who can be described as true parasites. Living off others for extended periods, they are cunning manipulators who constantly exploit their victims. Even more frighteningly, some do not hesitate to take their behavior to the extreme, committing crimes with unimaginable cruelty. On the evening of March 19, 1999, residents of an apartment complex near the Iowa City campus were alarmed by a strong smell of burning and smoke coming from one of the apartments. Some residents stepped outside and saw a fierce fire raging through the windows of a small apartment. They immediately called the fire department. When firefighters arrived on the scene, the fire had already spread, shattering windows and producing thick columns of black smoke. Despite their best efforts, extinguishing the fire proved difficult. Neighbors stated that the apartment was believed to be unoccupied. As the permanent residents were out of town, firefighters initially focused on fighting the fire from the outside before entering the building. Once inside, the smoke began to clear. A desolation scene unfolded. The entire apartment had been devastated. With furniture and belongings reduced to ashes, they found a body lying near the entrance to the hallway. More shockingly, a second body was found in a back room. Both bodies were burned beyond recognition. The first body, located near the door, was less severely burned and was identified as a young woman who appeared to have died from smoke inhalation while attempting to escape. The second body, lying on a bed in a back bedroom. With most of the flesh completely destroyed, it was impossible to identify the victims at the scene due to the severe burns. For this, an examination in the laboratory of forensic experts would be required. Police were quickly called in to investigate the cause of the fire and the deaths. Initial theories suggested that the victims may have succumbed to toxic fumes or suffered an accident, possibly caused by an unextinguished cigarette, since the apartment was a common rental for students during exam periods. Investigators also considered the possibility that the fire was linked to excessive drinking. However, what they uncovered next completely shifted the direction of the investigation. Among the ashes, firefighters found a few items that were surprisingly intact. Among these items, they discovered documents that could help identify the deceased. A driver's license was found in a purse belonging to one of the victims. Following an investigation, the forensic experts confirmed the identities of the victims in there. A victim was identified as 29-year-old Laura Dalton a few days before the fire. Laura had traveled to Iowa City to visit her cousin. Strangely, Laura neither owned nor rented the burned apartment, suggesting she had ended up there by chance. None of the neighbors recognized her. Laura had grown up in the area and lived with her parents before moving away as an adult. However, she often returned to her hometown to visit family and stayed for several days. Iowa City was her favorite place, where she enjoyed spending time not only with her relatives, but also with her friends. It was a charming town where most residents lived modest lives centered around education and part-time work. The second victim, Maria Lehner, was a 27-year-old woman. She came to this town on business. She lived in a rented apartment that was not the one involved in the fire. Maria, like Laura, had no known relationship or connection with the owners of the burned apartment. The next morning, Laura's cousin and Maria's mother went to the morgue to identify the bodies. However, the autopsy revealed a disturbing detail. Both victims had died before the fire started. Their lungs showed no signs of smoke or hot air inhalation, indicating they were not breathing when the fire consumed the apartment. Although the body was severely damaged, the forensic team quickly determined the cause of death to be blunt force trauma to the head, most likely from a construction tool. While inspecting the burned apartment, forensic experts discovered what appeared to be bloodstains and strands of hair. The police promptly began analyzing these as potential evidence. This evidence later confirmed their suspicions were right. A barbell was found in the apartment and identified as the murder weapon, as it contained traces of blood from both victims. During the apartment search, investigators also found an empty can, despite severe fire damage. Appeared to be a can typically used for storing and transporting fuel. Meanwhile, the owners of the apartment denied ever storing fuel in their home, so they determined it had been used shortly before the fire. Detectives concluded that the attacker had murdered Maria and Laura, poured gasoline from the can on their bodies and nearby furniture, and set the apartment on fire to destroy evidence. The presence of flammable substances made it clear that this was a deliberate and carefully planned double murder. However, proven facts, not assumptions, were needed to solve the case. Forensic experts thoroughly examined the scene, a cigarette butt was discovered near the bodies, simultaneously. Forensic experts were in for a great surprise, as it turned out that traces of incipient decomposition were found on the bodies. This decomposition will take at least a day after death. No evidence suggested that the bodies had been moved to the apartment after the murders. Most likely, Maria and Laura were killed there, and their bodies were burned several days later. Through investigation, the investigators speculate that Laura was killed on the night between Wednesday and Thursday, and her body remained in the apartment. Maria was killed a day later. On the night between Thursday and Friday, this discovery shocked the police, as they had initially believed the arson was carried out immediately after the murders to destroy evidence. The most puzzling aspect was that Maria had been brought to the apartment where Laura's body had already been decomposing for a day. Laura's friends reported that the last time they saw her alive was on Wednesday evening. That night, the group of friends decided to spend the evening at a bar, and Laura joined them for a few hours. Everyone was having fun, drinking, and relaxing. They tried not to overindulge. During the evening, Laura met a young man who had been sitting at a nearby table for most of the night. As the group became more intoxicated, Laura and the man started talking. Witnesses later admitted they didn't pay much attention to him. The two quickly struck up a conversation, and after some time, the man suggested they go to another bar. Laura initially declined, but eventually agreed. After some persuasion, witnesses stated that this was the last time anyone saw Laura alive. She left with the man shortly before midnight, according to the autopsy report. She was killed not long after. The thing to do now is to find this strange man. Unfortunately, no one knew his name and could not really describe his appearance. The police needed at least some details to begin the investigation. Witnesses were thoroughly questioned to create a rough profile of the unknown man. He was described as tall, around 20 years old or slightly older. With brown hair, witnesses also noted his disheveled appearance. Laura's friends were unaware of what had happened to her. She didn't call them the next day, and she hadn't contacted anyone at all. Laura also failed to attend the group's next party, held at the same bar the following evening. This time, Laura's friend, Maria, was present at the party. Maria's body was also later found in the burned apartment, and it appears she was killed just one day after Laura. Strangely, witnesses reported an almost identical story about Laura. Maria had been drinking with friends, and she caught the attention of a similarly unkempt young man sitting at a nearby table. He appeared friendly and spent much of the evening trying to charm her. The man seemed skilled at gaining trust, easily convincing Maria to leave with him for another party. She failed to recognize the threat and trusted the persuasive stranger. The bar owner also noticed them as they left. He provided the investigative agency with a slightly more detailed description of the man the investigator were searching for. This helped detectives create a more accurate sketch, despite the limited information, but the investigation now had a lead. The police also identified his behavior pattern. He observed women in bars for extended periods, waiting until they were intoxicated enough to lower their guard before making his move. In addition, he had access to one of the rented apartments. Either using his own key or the trust of the landlords, the police interviewed everyone, including students, who might have had access to the burned apartment. However, most of them had moved out long ago and no longer had access. For a time, the investigation stalled. In addition to the help of forensic experts and laboratory tests, additional evidence is needed to advance the case. One of the key stages of the work was to conduct an analysis of the discovered empty can. The resulting picture was consistent with what is left by gasoline vapors. The empty can was clearly used to carry fuel, which was poured over the bodies. Among the other evidence found at the scene of the double murder was a matchbox with just one match missing. It appeared the perpetrator assumed the fire would destroy all evidence. However, the fire was extinguished before everything was consumed. Investigators concluded the match had been used to ignite the fire. Unfortunately, no fingerprints or DNA were found on the matchbox. leaving it unusable for identifying the suspect. After unsuccessful attempts at investigation, the investigators returned to the scene to look for more clues. By that point, the apartment had been cleaned and organized, making it impossible to find any new evidence. Initially, they had photographs taken at the scene of the fire. In one of the photos, they noticed a pair of suspicious glasses. These glasses matched descriptions provided by witnesses who had seen strangers at the bar days before the fire. Although the glasses survived the fire, they were not listed among the collected evidence. Fortunately, the apartment owner had not discarded them and handed them over to the police. When detectives examined the glasses, they discovered they also did not belong to the former tenants. The most valuable evidence ended up in the hands of the investigators, which later allowed them to obtain a huge amount of valuable information about the criminal to prove his connection with the murders, that these were not ordinary glasses, but ones with special lenses that correct vision. They were checked to determine what vision deviation the criminal had. This helped the detectives narrow down their suspect and determine whether these were his glasses. After that, the police officers had enough evidence and testimony to approximately reconstruct the picture of what happened. They reviewed the chain of events that led to this tragic outcome several times. In the end, the most probable version was recognized as the following. Presumably, both girls died one day before the fire started. The cause of death for each was prolonged beating with a blunt object, likely a barbell. They received head injuries incompatible with life to get rid of traces of the crime. The attacker decided to set fire to the apartment along with the bodies. The attacker appeared to stage the scene to resemble a real-life event. He placed the second victim in the hallway, while the first victim was beaten to death in bed. Afterward, he brought a gas can of gasoline into the apartment and carefully poured it over the furniture, floor, walls, and the victims' bodies. However, his critical mistake was smoking during the process. At the crime scene, forensic experts discovered a cigarette that had been extinguished and was not destroyed by the fire. Initially, no traces of the killer were found on the cigarette. Based on the circumstances, it seems the attacker was bent over, smoking, and pouring gasoline. When the concentration of vapors increased, the cigarette ignited. The resulting flames struck the attacker in the face, causing him to drop his glasses. The glasses were found slightly melted. It being in a less damaged part of the apartment, it is likely that the cigarette ignited the gasoline, triggering a chain reaction. This forced the killer to abandon the gas can, glasses, and cigarette at the crime scene, and assuming they would be destroyed in the fire. However, these items became key evidence. After interviewing the owner of the burned apartment, it was revealed that several valuable items, including 2 expensive household appliances, were missing. The investigators suspected the attacker would try to sell the stolen items, so they focused on local pawn shops. As these are the quickest and easiest places to sell stolen goods, their efforts paid off when they identified a suspect. After speaking with the owner of the pawn shop closest to the burned apartment, the detectives obtained receipts for items matching the stolen goods. Selling property at a pawn shop requires presenting an ID and filling out paperwork, which meant the attacker couldn't avoid giving his real name. This is how the investigators came across John Lee Memmer. John was a 20-year-old unemployed man who was well known in the city since he was a regular at various parties. He knew where to get a free drink. He was a good conversationalist and was described as a quiet guy. John attended various events after moving to the city. He had been jobless for a long time and didn't have a permanent home. He relied on friends, particularly students, who let him stay in their rented apartments, allowing him to get by. It is important to note that his appearance matches the description of the suspect and also often wears glasses. When the police looked into John's background, they discovered he had previously been conditionally released early for theft and document forgery. Now, John, the main suspect, could face a real prison sentence due to repeated offenses. An investigation also began into his possible involvement in the double murder. Immediately after that, John was arrested, and during interrogation, the police noticed slight burns on his face, including a small burn on his nose. This detail reinforced the detective's suspicion of his involvement in the fire. John appeared nervous and often hesitated before answering their questions. When he realized he was a suspect in the arson and murders, he began changing his story, leading to numerous contradictions. He claimed that, on that night, he broke in and stole several household appliances, which he later pawned. However, he denied any involvement in the arson or the murders of Maria and Laura. Refused to accept those charges, John explained that he had been using the apartment with another homeless man. Because knowing the owners would be out of town for an extended period, he described the second homeless man as suspicious and potentially dangerous. But the investigation could not confirm that this person existed. It seemed likely that John had fabricated the story to shift the blame. The investigators was determined that just a few days after the discovery of the two bodies, John visited an optical store and ordered new glasses using an old prescription. The glasses found in the burnt apartment completely corresponded to the prescription for correcting John's vision. This didn't seem like a mere coincidence. John was unable to explain why his glasses were found in the burned apartment, claiming he had lost them a long time ago. Following this, forensic experts decided to analyze the cigarette butt found at the arson site, suspecting it might contain DNA evidence from the perpetrator. By this point, John had already provided the investigators with samples for analysis. The results revealed traces of saliva and skin on the cigarette butt, which were examined and matched to John's DNA. This breakthrough was achieved using advanced forensic methods introduced in the late 1990s, which had become widely used by police at the time. These things strongly linked John to the crime scene. Though not directly to the victims, John later changed his story, admitting that he had been in the apartment and had snuck in with another homeless person when the apartment renter was not home. He offered a plausible explanation for why his glasses and cigarettes were found there. The police also focused on other pieces of evidence, particularly a leather jacket belonging of Laura, which was found in the ashes. Investigators began searching for traces of DNA. Initially, the jacket was examined under ultraviolet light, but no traces were found. Then, a different method was used to search for fingerprints. The fingerprint on Laura's jacket was identified as John's, however. This alone did not confirm his involvement in the murder. Detectives also examined John's shoes and the clothes he wore on the days of the murders. On one of his shoes, they found two tiny droplets of blood, about the size of a match head. Forensic scientists analyzed the samples and determined that the blood belonged to Maria. It was clear that John had attempted to wash his clothes, but traces of blood remained. Now, the police obtained undeniable proof of his guilt. John was unable to explain how the victim's blood ended up on his shoes. This detail became clear evidence that he had been in contact with Maria around the time of her death. When confronted with the accusations and presented with the evidence, John changed his story yet again. This time, he claimed that he had invited Maria and Laura over. They had been intimate. Then he left first, however, due to the condition of the bodies. This claim couldn't be verified. Forensic experts found no indication of an intimate relationship prior to Maria and Laura deaths. His story was clearly false, and his shifting testimonies only deepened the investigators' mistrust. With all the evidence collected, the prosecutor's office pieced together the chain of events leading to the fire and the double murder. John had gained access to the apartment while the tenants were out of town. There were no signs of forced entry. This easy access to the home alarmed the tenant's owner and moved elsewhere. After meeting Maria and Laura at a nightclub, John waited until they were intoxicated and less alert. He then initiated friendly conversation, flirted, and used his charm to gain their trust. Eventually, he convinced they to go to this apartment. His intention was to pursue intimacy, but neither Laura nor Maria reciprocated his advances. This rejection infuriated him and caused him to lose control. In his anger, he attacked Maria and Laura with a barbell. The severe head injuries they sustained from the blows resulted in their deaths the following day. On Friday, John returned to the scene to destroy evidence and steal household appliances from the apartment to cover his tracks. He set a fire, but made several mistakes, leaving behind significant evidence at the crime scene. A few days later, John was tried on charges of first-degree murder and arson. The defense has stressed that John is not known for being aggressive, although he has a history of minor crimes. He has never physically harmed anyone. Besides, one key point the prosecution has highlighted is the tattoo of 2 teardrops near his eyes, a symbol commonly used in the criminal world to indicate murder. He got these tattoos before attending the trial. However, John claims that the tattoo were merely a tribute to 2 friends who died in a car accident. The prosecution presented a combination of circumstantial and direct evidence to build its case. As John has never confessed to his guilt, the overwhelming evidence convinced the jury that John was the perpetrator. As a result, John Lee Memmer was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of arson. He's sentenced to 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole. After serving 10 years, John appealed, claiming that the public defenders had failed to do their job effectively. He argued that the prosecution relied heavily on circumstantial evidence and that his defense team had failed to adequately challenge it. The appeal was considered by the court. However, after a retrial, he was found guilty, and the sentence was upheld. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the case of Carla Faye Tucker. The events began on the morning of June 13, 1983, when the Texas Police Department responded to an urgent call from a man. Officers were dispatched to a house in the northeastern part of the city. Inside, they discovered the bodies of a man and a woman who had been brutally killed with a pickaxe. Initially, investigators suspected the murders were the result of a robbery gone wrong, but the sheer savagery of the crime made this theory unlikely. Once the victims' identities were confirmed and their backgrounds investigated, new revelations emerged that drastically changed the direction of the case. Houston, Texas, with a population of over 1 million, is the largest city in the region and the hub of Harris County. It is home to people of various religions and cultural backgrounds who live together in this diverse community. However, as the population grows, so does the crime rate, and Houston is now ranked among the top 100 most dangerous cities in America. On the morning of June 13, 1983, a man waited for his colleague, Jerry Lynn Dean, to pick him up for work. Jerry, however, never arrived. They had recently signed a contract for a security system installation job, and he knew Jerry was not the type to miss work without a good reason. Since they lived close to each other, he decided to check on Jerry after waiting for some time, assuming his colleague might have overslept. When Gregory reached Jerry's apartment, he noticed the door was slightly open. He stepped inside and called out for Jerry, but received no response. He found the TV and the sound system were tangled together, and Jerry's motorcycle, which Jerry had been working on, was gone. Concerned, he began searching all over the apartment. Eventually, he opened the door to the guest bedroom. Little did he know that he was about to discover something horrifying. Jerry was found lying on the floor next to the bed, surrounded by a pool of blood. On the bed was a woman unfamiliar to he, with a pickaxe lodged in her chest. Horrified by the gruesome scene, he fled the apartment and went straight home to call the police. When the police arrived at the apartment, they observed that the space was in disarray, with tools, motorcycle parts, and dirty clothes scattered across the floor. In the guest bedroom, they discovered the bodies of Jerry and the unknown woman. The officers documented the crime scene, including the pickaxe, which was identified as the murder weapon. One officer removed the pickaxe from the woman's chest and placed it aside for collection as evidence. The bodies were sent to the Harris County Medical Examiner's Office for autopsy. During questioning, The colleague said to the investigators that the apartment door had been open when he arrived, and the interior looked as though someone had ransacked it. He also noticed that Jerry's motorcycle and blue Chevrolet El Camino pickup truck were missing. A search of the apartment revealed that both victims' wallets had also disappeared. Additionally, investigators discovered that the bird hammer used in the attack was taken from Jerry's toolkit. The detectives found no evidence of forced entry into the apartment. Neighbors mentioned hearing loud noises from the apartment early in the morning, but did not call the police, as they neither heard cries for help nor explosion and assumed nothing serious had occurred. Investigators theorized that the perpetrator was either someone the victims knew and willingly let in, or someone who entered through a door that was accidentally unlocked. Meanwhile, the severity of the attack pointed to the possibility of a premeditated murder. The autopsy revealed that Jerry sustained 28 pickaxe wounds, a head injury caused by a blunt object striking the back of his skull through fingerprints. The police identified Deborah Ruth Thornton as the second victim. She suffered 15 pickaxe wounds to her head and chest, with a fatal strike piercing her heart. After ruling out random theft, investigators turned their attention to the victim's close contacts. Jerry had met Deborah just the day before at a pool party. This was the first time they had met. Friends at the party stated that Deborah had attended to relax and escape her personal problems. Further inquiries revealed that Deborah was married and had 2 children. So, suspicion first fell on her husband. The husband was questioned and told investigators that on the evening of June 12, he had been at home with his children. He acknowledged that he and his wife had been having misunderstandings recently, but insisted he loved her and would never harm her. He claimed to know nothing about Deborah's infidelity and said he had never heard of a man named Jerry before. Investigators confirmed the husband's alibi and ruled him out as a suspect afterward. They learn of another person who may have held a grudge: Deborah's father, William. William had a criminal past, including a conviction for assault, for which he had served time. He currently owned a large business in Texas, but was under investigation for tax evasion. Further investigation revealed that Deborah had once been called to testify in court against her father, which could have provided a motive for murder. William was questioned, but he denied any involvement in the crime. Investigators kept him under surveillance for several weeks, but found no evidence connecting him to the double murder. Another team of investigators began looking into Jerry's past, uncovering that he, too, was surrounded by complex relationships. Jerry worked as a mechanic, and among those who knew him, a woman named Carla Faye Tucker. Carla, known for her love of partying, had a strained relationship with Jerry. The tension started when Carla first met Jerry, the boyfriend of Sean. From the start, she had a poor impression of him. She thought he was weak and unsuitable for her best friend. Their conflict escalated after an incident at Carla's apartment. Jerry had parked his motorcycle in her living room, and oil leaked from the bike, staining her carpet. Furious, Carla eventually kicked Jerry out of her apartment that night. In the months that followed, their animosity deepened. One day, when Carla and Sean planned a trip to see their favorite bands, Jerry became very upset. He found Carla's photo album and cut out all her pictures, including the only photo she had with her mother. This act infuriated Carla, and she tried to persuade Sean to end her relationship with Jerry. However, instead of separating, Sean and Jerry moved in together and got married. Despite everything, Carla remained convinced that her friend had made a mistake by choosing Jerry. A month after the wedding, Sean visited Carla's house to collect a jacket. During the visit, Carla mentioned that she no longer wanted to see Jerry. Upon hearing that Jerry had parked outside near her house, Carla stormed outside, confronted him, hit him in the face, and broke his glasses. This incident led to Jerry being taken to the hospital to remove glass fragments from his eye. In June of the same year, Sean and Jerry separated, citing accusations of domestic violence and clashing lifestyles. In retaliation for the alleged abuse she claimed to have suffered, Sean withdrew a large sum of money from Jerry's account and went shopping with Carla. After hearing this, Jerry allegedly began plotting his revenge. Rumors circulated that he had hired someone to attack Carla, intending to disfigure her. Their volatile relationship quickly attracted the attention of investigators. Carla was born on November 18, 1959, in Houston, Texas. To Larry and Carolyn, she had two much older sisters who were said to have negatively influenced her. This influence contributed to Carla starting to smoke at just 8 years old. When she was 10, her parents divorced, and she discovered that Larry was not her biological father. By the age of 12, Carla had begun use with banned substance and lived loosely with men. At 14, she dropped out of school and, following her mother's example, started working as an escort. Carolyn even taught Carla how to use her body to earn money. Around this time, Carla's sister introduced her to men who frequented biker clubs. Carla and her mother also became passionate fans of rock music and began traveling with music groups, embracing a carefree and unconventional lifestyle. Carla adapted quickly to this new way of living. At 16, she met Stephen Griffith, a laborer, and the two planned to marry. However, Carla found married life overwhelming. They frequently argued, and their fights often turned physical. Stephen even told his friends that Carla could hit harder than any man he knew. After 2 years of constant conflict, they decided to separate, and Carla returned to her previous lifestyle. When Carla was 20, Carolyn passed away. By that time, Carla had returned to spending time in biker clubs. It was during this period that she became close friends with Sean Dean. Their bond grew strong. The detectives questioned Carla. She admitted to having disagreements with Jerry, but denied any involvement in the crime. Carla allowed the police to take her fingerprints and initially agreed to a polygraph test, but later refused it after her boyfriend advised against it. The fingerprints provided no useful leads, as experts couldn't find viable evidence at the crime scene or on the murder weapon. However, Carla's sudden refusal to take a lie detector test made the detectives even more suspicious of her. Even so, this was not enough to add Carla or Sean to the list of suspects. Detectives continued visiting them regularly, hoping one of them would slip up. Carla appeared completely unbothered and carried on with her life, attending parties as usual. Weeks passed, and detectives still could not find any evidence linking of them. A detective from the homicide department took an interest in the case after hearing the name Daniel Ryan Garrett. Carla's boyfriend, the detective, had grown up in the same neighborhood as Daniel and also acquainted with Daniel's ex-wife. The detective contacted Daniel's ex-wife and asked if she had any information about Daniel or Carla's potential involvement in the Houston double murder. She confessed that she had not seen her ex-husband for a long time and expressed a desire to talk to him about it. On July 18, 1983, the Houston Police Department received an urgent call. Judging by the voice on the other end of the line, the caller sounded extremely nervous. He demanded to speak specifically to this detective. It was Daniel's brother, and he claimed to have information about the murder. Daniel's brother confessed that he had kept this information a secret for 5 weeks. He also mentioned a third individual, James Leibrandt, a friend of his, who was present at Jerry's house on the night of the incident. He warned that the situation was escalating because Carla had been talking about killing one of the witnesses to silence them. During his interrogation, he said that early in the morning of June 13, Daniel and Carla arrived at his house in a blue pickup truck. Carla bragged that she had taken care of Jerry and an unidentified woman, and both of them asked him to help destroy the evidence. Initially, he hesitated to get involved, but ultimately decided to assist. He burned Jerry's wallet in an ashtray, and the stolen motorcycle parts were dumped into a nearby ditch. On July 20, 1983, Daniel's brother rode a motorcycle to Carla's house with a transmitter hidden under his shirt and a recorder concealed in his shoe. The detective and the investigative team listened from a surveillance van parked a block away. Daniel's brother casually started the conversation, carefully guiding it toward the topic of the killing. Ultimately, the suspect, Carla, provided a detailed account of what happened on the night of June 12. Carla had organized a birthday party for her sister. The celebration lasted the entire weekend, with friends coming and going, drinking alcohol, and using banned substance, which were plentiful in the house by Sunday evening, when only James, Daniel, and Carla remained. She told Daniel that she felt overwhelmed with emotions and energy. The three of them began discussing a planned crime, and Carla suggested stealing Jerry's motorbike and selling it for parts to make money. She expressed her deep hatred for Jerry and said she wanted to make him pay for everything he had done to her and Sean around 3 a.m. They went to Jerry's house. They entered without any trouble because Carla had stolen an extra set of keys several weeks earlier. At the time, she didn't know why she had taken the keys, but they ended up being crucial on the night of the murder. During a recorded conversation, Daniel's brother asked if they had planned to kill anyone when they entered the house. Carla replied no, explaining that everything had happened spontaneously at the time. Carla was intoxicated and under the influence of banned substance. She sat on top of Jerry as he woke up. Trying to restrain him, Jerry attempted to free himself by grabbing her hands, but at that moment, Daniel struck him multiple times in the head with a hammer while in her drunken and drugged state. Carla became irritated by the gurgling sounds Jerry, who was dying, was making in a fit of rage. She grabbed a pickaxe and struck his body with it. Carla later admitted that using the flat side of the pickaxe gave her a feeling of arousal. Daniel struck the final, deadly blow to Jerry's head with the hammer and then left the room. At that moment, Carla noticed a woman hidden under a blanket in the corner of the bed. Up to that point, she had been so focused on Jerry that she hadn't realized someone else was there. Carla and the woman began to struggle. Their fight continued until Daniel returned, overcome by rage. Carla attacked the woman repeatedly with the pickaxe, eventually driving it straight into her heart. Daniel was arrested just a block from his home while heading to work. At the same time, armed police officers entered Carla's house to take her into custody. James Brandt, who was visiting Carla as a guest, was also arrested at the police station. All of Carla's friends were questioned. They shared what they knew, providing consistent accounts, and all noted that Carla had always disliked Jerry. However, both Carla and Daniel remained silent during questioning. Carla claimed she had been drugged and could not remember anything about that night. During the investigation, Brandt cooperated with authorities and testified against Carla and Daniel. He claimed that after using the banned substance, he felt restless and needed something to relieve himself, leading to his involvement in the theft scheme ultimately resulted in Brandt receiving a light sentence. Carla and Daniel were charged with the murders of Jerry and Deborah. Both were held in Harris County Jail without bail. In September 1983, they appeared in court, but their trials were held separately. Carla faced charges for both murders, while Daniel, after testifying at a hearing, had the charge for Deborah's murder dropped. Carla pleaded not guilty and remained in jail awaiting her trial. During her detention, jail staff reported that Carla behaved defiantly and provocatively. Everything changed, however, while awaiting trial. She began to recover from the effects of alcohol and banned substance. She started reading books from the prison library and, for the first time in her life, picked up a Bible. Later, Carla admitted to her cellmates and the staff that it was during this time she began to understand the consequences of her actions. She started attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, where she met others whose lives had been destroyed by these toxic things. Inspired by their stories, Carla created her own Bible study group and resolved to become a better person. When Carla repented, she realized that the Lord forgives those who are lost. She came to believe that holding on to guilt and failing to seek forgiveness blocks one's connection to God and fills life with bitterness. Feeling forgiven by the Lord, Carla's heart became filled with love, which she believed should guide her life. In 1984, Carla stood trial for the murder of Jerry and Deborah. She explained that, at the time of the crime, She was heavily under the influence of banned substance and alcohol. Carla said that the murder was not planned, but occurred as a sudden outburst of anger during a robbery. Fueled by the substances she had consumed, several witnesses for the defense supported her lawyers, arguing that Carla and Daniel, on that night, were unable to distinguish right from wrong. However, the jury could not reach a unanimous verdict on her guilt. Carla was given the chance to testify on her own behalf before the judge made the final decision. She spoke for nearly 5 hours, sharing details about her past and stating that only after being imprisoned did she fully understand her actions, despite her emotional testimony. Carla was ultimately sentenced to death by lethal injection, becoming the only woman in Texas to receive this punishment. In November 1984, Carla testified at Daniel's trial, hoping he would not be convicted. However, he was also sentenced to death. That marked the last time Carla and Daniel saw each other, while the legal system labeled Carla a murderer. Many saw her as a symbol of reform, initially resigned to her fate of dying by lethal injection. Carla's outlook changed in 1993 when she learned that Daniel, who was awaiting execution, had died of liver disease. This motivated her to fight for her own life with the support of a prison chaplain. She began the process of appealing her case. Carla appealed to have her death sentence reduced to life imprisonment. Her request gained support from notable figures, including Pope John Paul II, the Prime Minister of Italy, Romano Prodi, U.S. House Speaker Newt Gingrich, and televangelist Pat Robertson. Surprisingly, Ronald Carlson, the brother of the victims, Deborah, also supported clemency after witnessing Carla's transformation during her time in prison. Even Hans, the warden of the Huntsville's prison, testified that Carla had been an exemplary inmate. The decision now rested with the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles, which was responsible for recommending whether her death sentence should be commuted. However, the final authority belonged to Governor Texas George W. Bush. On January 28, 1998, the board rejected Carla's request. In response, she wrote a letter to Governor Bush, acknowledging her actions as acts of extreme cruelty and recounting her journey of transformation. Despite her plea, the governor denied her final appeal just hours before her execution, refusing to commute her death sentence to life imprisonment. On February 2, 1998, Carla requested a peach, a banana, and a salad with dressing as her last meal, according to prison authorities. She spent the morning with her family from 8 a.m. to noon. While many hoped her final hours would remain peaceful, others anticipated that the day would be emotionally difficult for all involved until the very end. People awaited the governor's decision. Would he grant her mercy? On February 3, 1998, Carla Tucker was executed by lethal injection in Texas. She had requested the presence of her sister, Kari Weeks, and some friends during her final moments at 6:45 p.m., 8 minutes after the injection. She was pronounced dead. Carla was the first woman to be executed in Texas in 135 years since the reinstatement of the death penalty. Carla was buried at Forest Park, Lawndale Cemetery in Houston later. Accusations arose against Governor Bush, alleging that he lacked compassion for Carla during the appeals process. In response, Bush issued a statement expressing that he had forgiven her, but emphasized that justice still needed to be served for the 2 lives she had taken. Carla inspired the creation of several fictional characters in stories that explored her troubled upbringing and how it eventually led to her crimes. Fred Allen, the execution team's captain, revealed that overseeing Carla's execution caused him deep emotional turmoil. He later resigned from his role in the Texas prison system and became a vocal critic of the death penalty. Allen argued that no one has the moral right to take another person's life, even if it is sanctioned by the law. He also shared that when Carla was brought in, he realized she was the first woman scheduled for execution, and he vividly remembered the details of that day. Carla looked at him and said, "Thank you, Allen, "For everything you are doing," Alan replied. "You're welcome," and fastened the safety strap. Other members of the team carried out the necessary procedures, and everything proceeded as expected. When Carla was pronounced dead, Alan and the others placed her body on the stretcher, removed the straps, and went about their usual tasks. However, shortly afterward, Alan suddenly imagined the pain Carla must have felt. He broke into a cold sweat, began trembling, and burst into tears. It was a deeply shocking experience for him. The changes Carla underwent in prison profoundly affected many who had initially seen her as nothing more than an antisocial individual. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Joanne Witt. Joanne Witt is a single mother and engineer who raised her daughter, Tyler, on her own during a challenging teenage period filled with rebellion. Despite the hardships, Joanne loved Tyler deeply and tried her best to give her a better life. However, Tyler's rebellion came to a head when she was 14. Leading to a devastating tragedy, Joanne suffered from lupus, an autoimmune disease, which made it difficult for her to form healthy relationships with men. Despite this, she had a strong desire to become a mother. She chose to undergo artificial insemination. Despite her family's objections due to concerns about genetics, nevertheless, Joanne went ahead with the procedure. Although her pregnancy was difficult, she eventually gave birth to a healthy baby girl, Tyler. Tyler's struggles began in childhood. She was often naughty, short-tempered, and refused to go to kindergarten, forcing Joanne, who had a lot of work to do, to deal with the situation. One day, when Tyler was 5, she threw another tantrum, screaming and refusing to go to kindergarten. Frustrated, Joanne lost her temper and hit Tyler. A staff member at the kindergarten witnessed the incident and reported it as abuse, prompting an investigation by Child Protective Services. During the investigation, Joanne admitted to hitting Tyler in a fit of anger and expressed remorse for her actions. As a result, Tyler was temporarily placed in the care of Joanne's parents. This situation was extremely difficult for Joanne, who felt alone. She loved her daughter deeply and wanted to reunite with her. So she decided to take parenting classes. Joanne's determination eventually paid off, and after 6 months, she regained custody of Tyler. Their relationship began to improve, and Tyler started to understand and respect her mother. Friends and family noticed their growing closeness. Despite these improvements, Tyler still had occasional tantrums. Joanne did her best to provide a comfortable and prosperous life for her daughter, Tyler. They lived in a 5-bedroom house with a pool in El Dorado Hills, an affluent suburb of California. Tyler had many experiences, including frequent trips to Mexico and Jamaica. However, this period of prosperity did not last long. As Tyler entered her teens, she became increasingly aggressive, leading to serious conflicts between her and Joanne. Although there is no evidence that Joanne was cruel, people close to the family knew that Tyler often insulted her mother. She accused Joanne of being an alcoholic and believed her mother was useless because of her drinking. In fact, there is no evidence that Joanne was an alcoholic. No one ever saw her drunk. She suffered from lupus, which made her face flush and caused her pain when she took medication. A glass of wine on the weekend helped her cope with these difficulties. Unfortunately, it was during these times that Tyler said the harshest things about her mother. When Tyler was 12, she began running away from home, and her academic performance dropped significantly. One day, after starting a fight, Tyler hit her mother several times. Tyler then called the police and tried to accuse her mother of abuse and alcoholism. However, Tyler had no visible injuries, while Joanne had multiple injuries to her face, which made Tyler's testimony seem unreliable. The police found no evidence of Tyler's abuse or Joanne's alcoholism, leading them to close the case in late 2008. Tyler then met an older boy named Stephen Paul Culver, and they quickly connected. Like Tyler, Stephen lived in El Dorado Hills. He was generally a nice guy, and Tyler responded positively to him. Stephen was a college student who aspired to be a math teacher and worked part-time at a coffee shop. He was not considered cruel or dangerous. Instead, he was seen as a bit eccentric. Tyler met Stephen at the coffee shop where he worked, and they became friends after a few months. Their friendship developed into a romantic relationship. Tyler often complained to Stephen about her mother, whom she described as an alcoholic and accused of abusing her for years. At the time, Stephen was living with his father, but Tyler wanted to be closer to Stephen. Tyler convinced her mother to give Stephen a room in their house. At that time, Joanne had met Stephen several times and thought he was a nice guy. However, she was concerned about their age difference, as he was 5 years older than Tyler, and she was uncomfortable with having a man living in their house. Tyler's family and relatives were strongly against the idea, but Tyler assured her mother that Stephen was not a threat and that they were like siblings. Joanne did not know that this was a lie. Eventually, Joanne agreed to let Stephen move in. Pretending he was renting a room, he began paying Joanne $500 a month, a small amount that helped supplement the family budget. During the day, he studied and worked, and in the evenings, he helped with housework, tutored Tyler in math, and had dinner with them. Although the arrangement seemed strange, Joanne realized that it was beneficial for her daughter, and she appreciated the extra help around the house. Stephen officially moved into their home in 2009, by which time he had formed a close relationship with Tyler. Joanne did not know about their relationship in front of her. The two teenagers acted like siblings, successfully hiding their romance. Despite Joanne's suspicions, Tyler was able to convince her mother that they were just friends. During this time, Tyler's diary contained interesting entries about her boyfriend, expressing that they were always together, had no problems, and could be intimate whenever they wanted. She declared her love for him, asserting that nothing could come between them. Despite constant arguments with her mother, these never escalated into violence. Tyler's academic performance remained poor. She frequently broke curfew, smoked, and wrote more in her diary. Joanne, sensing potential danger, wrote in her diary that she feared for her daughter's safety. Her concerns were well-founded, as Tyler had a history of self-harm. During this time, Stephen acted responsibly. Noticing that Tyler was having trouble in school, he tried to persuade her not to skip classes and offered to help her with her studies, especially in math. However, despite his support, her relationship with Stephen had a negative impact on her. Tyler became obsessed with him and lost interest in her studies. On May 13, 2009, 47-year-old Joanne returned home and went into the utility room. There, she discovered lubricant, some toys, and a small amount of marijuana. Since Stephen kept his belongings in that room, the items were likely his. Joanne asked Stephen about the marijuana, and he claimed he did not use it and had kept it at the request of a friend. Joanne asked him to remove everything from the house, and he agreed to do so. The next day, Joanne came home early after work to investigate her growing suspicions. She was shocked to find Tyler and Stephen being intimate. Joanne was stunned to realize that her daughter and Stephen had been lying to her all along. Stephen was worried about going to jail and asked Tyler not to engage in such activities. Joanne remained calm and invited Stephen to talk to her at the park later. Without Tyler present during the conversation, Stephen revealed that he had been intimate with Tyler before moving into their house. The mother was shocked by this revelation, but Joanne decided not to report Stephen to the police. Instead, she suggested that he move out and never contact Tyler again. Stephen agreed and asked for more time to find a new place to live and pack his belongings. The family became very tense when Tyler learned that Stephen would be moving out soon. Tyler became angry with her mother and yelled in response. Joanne pressured Stephen to leave quickly. After 2 days, Stephen moved out. Joanne brought 2 strong men from her workplace to help move Stephen's belongings to the street. They also spoke to Stephen privately. The men told him that he was behaving poorly and warned him to stay away from Tyler or face serious consequences. Stephen agreed to the warning and moved in with friends. But he and Tyler continued to see each other secretly. Now planning to run away together, Joanne was not naive. so she had her concerns. In early June, she found her daughter's diary and read it. What worried Joanne most was that Tyler was intimate with Stephen without using contraception. Putting her at risk of becoming pregnant, Joanne realized that her daughter was infatuated with Stephen, and the diary indicated that Tyler's mental health was deteriorating. The diary entries included disturbing fantasies about Joanne being involved in a tragic accident, suggesting that Tyler wanted to escape from her mother. This worried Joanne. She decided to report Tyler's relationship with Stephen to the police. When the police arrived and spoke to Tyler, she denied having a romantic relationship, claiming that her mother had misunderstood the situation. Tyler explained that she was just changing clothes in Stephen's room when her mother came in. However, Joanne provided the police with a diary that contained evidence of inappropriate intimacy. She showed the police a towel from Tyler's bed, thinking it might have traces of Stephen's DNA. When Tyler discovered this, they got into a loud argument that was heard by Joanne's neighbors. During the argument, Joanne called the police twice, claiming that her daughter was being aggressive. Patrol officers arrived and took Tyler to the station for questioning, but they released her after a few hours. Meanwhile, Joanne sought psychotherapy for her daughter, concerned that she might have serious mental health issues due to substance abuse. The situation seemed to have calmed down. Eventually, Tyler settled down, and her mother watched over her for the next few days. Tyler kept calling Stephen because she missed him, but due to pressure from the police, she was reluctant to talk to him. Tyler complained of stomach pains, loss of appetite, and migraines. She frequently asked to meet, hoping to gain sympathy. Gradually, Stephen agreed to meet her during the summer school holidays. He would sometimes pick her up, and they would spend time together in his car. When Joanne relaxed her surveillance of Tyler, Stephen started visiting his lover while Joanne was at work. Stephen would sneak through the fence to avoid being seen by the security cameras at the entrance. They continued to be intimate, but the only change in their relationship was how often they could see each other. They could only be together when Tyler's mother was not home, which frustrated Tyler more than ever. She blamed her mother for ruining her happy relationship and forbade them from seeing each other. Tyler also visited Stephen under the pretext of meeting friends, suspecting that their relationship was still ongoing. Her mother went to the police again. The girl was questioned, but she denied her relationship with Stephen. He also denied the relationship during questioning, with no evidence to support these claims. The couple was released once again on June 11, 2009. Joanne returned home from work and took her daughter, Tyler, to the store, exhausted by their recent arguments. Joanne wanted to mend their relationship. She apologized to Tyler for reading her diary and expressed sympathy for her daughter's feelings. To cheer her up, Joanne bought Tyler her favorite candy and ice cream, and Tyler seemed pleased with their reconciliation. After returning home, Joanne went straight to her room while Tyler played video games until 10 p.m. Unfortunately, a tragic event occurred that night. Joanne was home alone, so no one immediately noticed that she was missing when she did not show up for work the next day, June 12. Her absence did not immediately raise any alarms. Her co-workers thought she might be dealing with issues related to her daughter and assumed she was busy. Joanne's boss tried to contact her, but she did not answer her calls. Her co-workers later recalled that she had mentioned plans to go on a trip with Tyler, so they believed she was away and decided to wait until Monday to find out more. On Monday, June 15, when she still did not show up for work, her co-worker began trying to contact Joanne. She did not answer her phone. So later in the day, he contacted the police to request a welfare check. In the evening, the police went to her home but were unable to gain entry because no one answered the door. The officers then contacted Joanne's relatives for assistance. They were able to reach her father, who arrived in time and used a spare key to open the door. Inside, they found Joanne lying on the bed, dead for several days. The attacker had left the air conditioning running to slow the body's decomposition. The victim was identified by her father as Joanne. Forensic experts arrived at the scene to collect evidence, while the police began interviewing neighbors and family members. Everyone agreed that Joanne was a kind person with no enemies, but they noted her troubled relationship with her daughter, which had escalated into physical altercations. Police discovered that, shortly before her death, Joanne had reported her daughter's boyfriend to the police. This information aroused suspicion, making Tyler and her boyfriend, Stephen, the prime suspects in the case. As the investigation progressed, the couple was placed on the wanted list. The community was shocked by the murder, and the media reported extensively on Joanne's case. Joanne's co-workers reported that, on her last day of work, she left early to talk to her daughter and comfort her. Joanne remained optimistic about the situation, hoping, until the end, that she could control her daughter's rebellious behavior and that everything would be okay. On June 17, 2009, Stephen and Tyler were walking near a shopping mall in San Francisco when one of the patrol officers recognized them and arrested them. In their hotel room, the police discovered a suicide note, a DVD, and the poison they planned to use. Stephen and Tyler were then taken to Sacramento, where they were questioned separately. At first, the couple refused to talk and denied any involvement in the murder. They appeared confused about the situation and the charges against them. When they learned of the incident, they pretended to be surprised, and Tyler began to cry. Although no tears were shed, Stephen and Tyler were later charged and tried as adults. Despite their age, Tyler, who was only 14 at the time of the massacre, could face life in prison without parole if convicted of first-degree murder under state law. As the investigation progressed, the two shared their stories, which differed greatly. Tyler claimed that the night before the murder, she and her mother made up and then went to sleep in their separate rooms. She played video games until 10 p.m. before going to bed. Tyler went into her mother's room and found her asleep. She noticed a glass of wine on the bedside table and that the TV was on, which angered her. Tyler said that her mother had promised to stop drinking earlier, but had not kept her promise. Furious, Tyler called her boyfriend and told him that it was time to put her plan into action. She planned to mix sleeping pills with alcohol for her mother to drink. However, she did not have the medication available and had to wait for Stephen to finish his shift at 10 p.m. and bring it to her house later. When Stephen parked near the backyard fence and tried to call Tyler, her mother had woken up. Tyler then asked him to wait for about 20 minutes. He ended up waiting for nearly 40 minutes because Tyler did not respond to his calls or messages on various apps. Tyler then called Stephen back. Tyler asked him to come into the house, making it clear that he should use the main entrance, which was quite unusual since he usually came in through the fence to avoid being seen. He spent some time playing with the family dogs in the yard until Tyler invited him in. However, Tyler and Stephen have different accounts of what happened next. Tyler said that her boyfriend grabbed a knife and attacked her mother as soon as he entered the house. They had originally planned to do it together, but Tyler panicked, couldn't go through with it, and ran into the bathroom. There, she covered her ears to block out her mother's screams and the chaos outside. Meanwhile, Stephen tried to convince the police that Tyler had opened the door for him while covered in blood, claiming that's when she attacked her mother. Tyler packed up her things and turned on the TV in her mother's room to make it seem like someone was home. She also turned on the air conditioning to help slow the body's decomposition. Tyler closed all the windows and pulled the curtains, and with Stephen's help, they burned the bloody clothes in the fireplace. Tyler then showered and changed into new clothes. They then went to a nearby parking lot to rest and regain their strength before planning their escape. They had planned a trip to San Francisco afterward. They met their mutual friend, Matthew, and told him they were leaving, but initially withheld details about their destination and the reason for their trip. However, by the end of the conversation, they chose to reveal the truth to Matthew. This confession later became crucial evidence against them. Stephen confessed to Matthew that he had attacked Joanne in her neck and abdomen. However, the medical examiner found no injuries to her abdomen. Stephen later claimed that he had lied to protect his girlfriend before their arrest. The couple attempted to carry out a plan to die in the hills. They spent time visiting various locations before deciding to end their lives when police discovered Joanne's body. Stephen and Tyler had taken poison, however, the next morning. Stephen felt completely fine, while Tyler only had a mild stomachache. After their initial approach failed, they began exploring other methods, but none worked until the pair were arrested. Both suspects blamed each other for the murder. The case was complex, making it difficult to solve. Forensic scientists discovered traces of DNA under Joanne's fingernails. Possibly from a struggle, samples were sent for analysis, but the results were inconclusive. The owner of the DNA particles could not be identified, and at that time, DNA testing was not advanced enough to confirm that it was male DNA. Separate trials were scheduled for Tyler and Stephen, and they were held without bail. In September 2010, Tyler, on the advice of her attorney, chose to accept a plea deal from the prosecutor. By that time, she had already served more than a year in prison, which influenced her decision. Tyler agreed to testify against Stephen, helping to establish his first-degree murder conviction. While she would likely face a second-degree murder charge, she was also expected to testify in the abuse case against Stephen. Tyler entered into a plea agreement on September 17, 2010, and Stephen's trial began on May 17, 2011. Stephen's defense argued that he never threatened Joanne. They had a good relationship at first, as her mother treated him like a son when she believed he and her daughter were just friends. Their relationship soured after she learned of their romantic involvement. The defense contended that the daughter was responsible for the conflicts, claiming that she invited Stephen to live with them. Convinced her mother to accept him, they argued that Stephen always tried to avoid conflict and violence. The defense stated that he had worked hard to improve his life until he met Tyler, who shattered his peace and framed him for murder. In his testimony, Stephen said that when he met Tyler, she claimed to be several years older than she actually was, and that she also appeared older. Stephen asserted that Tyler had deceived everyone, including him. Most importantly, Stephen denied killing Joanne. He said that when he entered the house, Tyler was covered in blood. Tyler gave him a knife to clean, which resulted in his fingerprints being found on the murder weapon. Stephen asserted that he had never touched Joanne. He believed that his only wrongdoing was failing to stop Tyler from planning, helping her escape, and failing to call the police. The defense argued that Tyler may have influenced the murder because she was a skilled manipulator and had a history of problematic behavior, especially toward Joanne and others. Stephen only wanted to protect her, so he confessed in front of his friends. Unaware of the severity of the situation, they had agreed to end their lives anyway. The defense also presented Tyler's diary, in which she expressed her feelings about her mother's death, including threats and detailed descriptions of violence. This demonstrated her deliberate intent. Joanne's father confirmed that his daughter cared deeply for Tyler and did everything she could to ensure her safety. However, instead of appreciating this, Tyler became increasingly defiant, which escalated over time. Many people testified that what Joanne's father said was true, and witnesses confirmed Tyler's aggressive behavior. One day, a family friend witnessed Tyler slap her mother in the face, but Joanne did not react. This made her so anxious that she often cried alone and tried to relieve her sadness by drinking. Although many others insisted that she was not an alcoholic because she knew when to stop. During the trial, Matthew, a close friend of the couple, revealed that they had confessed to attacking Joanne. Matthew mentioned a wound to Joanne's abdomen that was allegedly caused by Stephen, but forensic experts could not find any such wounds. This allowed the defense to emphasize Stephen's dishonesty in an attempt to protect his loved one. After the plea deal, Tyler testified against Stephen in court. She said that she and Stephen had gone to her mother's room with knives, but at the last minute, she got scared and hid to avoid hearing any of her mother's screams, which meant she blamed her boyfriend. Stephen's lawyers argued that Tyler's testimony was more about reducing her own sentence than seeking justice. As part of her plea agreement, she was supposed to help the police find the murder weapon. the last time Matthew saw the knife. The couple showed it to him and explained what happened before they left for San Francisco. They claimed to have thrown it into a storm drain, but the police did not find it. It is possible the knife was washed away by the water. The prosecution claimed that male DNA was found under Joanne's fingernails, while there was no female DNA, however. Defense attorneys and an expert argued that the DNA could have been there due to normal interactions with any other man. Suggesting that the evidence did not conclusively prove guilt, the prosecutor believed Stephen was the killer and supported this claim by highlighting his antisocial behavior, difficulty interacting with others, lack of friends, fondness for cold weapons, and his knife collection. Additionally, a diary belonging to Stephen was discovered, which contained entries about his deep love for Tyler and his willingness to do anything for her. The prosecutor argued that these sentiments could imply murderous intent. On June 14, 2011, the jury began deliberations, which lasted several hours. Stephen Paul Culver was convicted of first-degree murder for the death of Joanne Witt. He broke down in tears as he left the courthouse. Joanne's father was upset that his granddaughter described Joanne as an alcoholic who would incite violence against her own child, in his view. This description did not reflect the truth. Joanne had devoted her life to ensuring Tyler's happiness instead of receiving gratitude. She suffered a tragic fate. On August 12, 2011, the judge announced the verdict. Stephen Paul Culver was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Meanwhile, Tyler Witt pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, waived his right to a jury trial, and waived his right to appeal. Tyler Witt was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years.